Yeah, it's a, they call it a mesh network. Yeah, so we have 4 spots set up, myself and Bob Williams next door.
Does it work well with the,
What's that? Yeah, I don't, yeah.
You got the chat with the
I've had
experience.
no problems at all.
Luck of the
because I
draw.
don't do any kind of internet. because-
Yeah.
I charged it, yeah, it's right there.
Mhm.
Last time it was, the time before that.
Hey Eric, how are you? Speakeasy. You gotta let me know when you're driving through town. I know. South. Oh, wow. Back up. Oh, man, that's a lot of driving. Yeah, well, just let me know as you guys come through and you're coming for skiing, just like, hey, are you gonna be in town this day? We're coming through this time. No. It's just, there's a full bar, there's a lounge, there's a full library.
$20 coffee gets you one drink.
Full library, so it's a nice place to hang out.
You'll have to see Eric put the password, it's locked.
Yeah.
You'll have to find out Eric's password. It's KMPUD.
Yeah. Yeah, just let me know. It's not, it's a little bit, it's like 10 minutes more.
Yeah.
I don't know the password.
I think I have it. Used for the wireless.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure I have it.
haven't-
Just
it's
give me a minute.
Programmed into mine. I don't remember it.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, not so bad. Please. I'm just making sure. all that.
The wireless.
Yeah, that's what, I was afraid that that happened, but because I know Derek had emailed it in for me. But I figured.
Three. No. All right, let me try one more time. It's- Yeah.
They're directional, but you're not seeing it.
33540. Yes, but it automatically does it.
Randy, can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear us, Randy?
Oh,
I can. Can you hear me?
yeah, I'm on this one.
Can you hear? I can't hear you at all. I have no sound, Drew, coming from Brandy. So Randy's.
It sounds just fine on my end.
Oh, pick the right one.
Hi, Art.
That one?
How's it going?
J C.
Make sure the speaker's on
Well,
too.
it hasn't worked yet, so.
Well, no big deal. I got my stuff. Can you say something, Brandy?
Hi, Drew.
There we
Uh,
Can you
go.
hear me?
Can you turn the speaker on?
That's
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah, I have two, yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Brandy.
Oh, went to sleep? Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah, the speaker did.
John's requesting the link to connect.
He's in. He's
He's
a
in?
panelist.
Okay, he sent it 2 minutes.
He sent it
All
to me. Yeah, he sent it to me too.
right. Okay, great.
I just promoted him. Make sure Tommy has the panelist link as well.
Sorry,
Unless he just came in. Oh, he came in the wrong way like that. I got him.
Okay, great.
Well, you'd probably need to take a couple of them and put them for my full name to fit, so. Well, my stunning eyes are probably enough, right? Come on.
It's been so long since I've seen him in person that I didn't recognize him
Oh, I
in the
know.
dumpster.
That's right. Just rock about it right here if you want, Howard.
All right, I have 2:00. We ready to start?
We are.
Okay, when you start the recording?
Yep.
To call a regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District to order and start with the roll call.
Sure. Epstein,
Present?
Schroeder. Can you hear us, John?
Yeah, present.
Okay. Mitchell
Here,
Burrow. Dornberg here.
Okay, and Eric, announcements.
We'd just like to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Board of Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. And I'd like to wish all the veterans happy Veterans Day. And if you'd like to speak and you're online, please use the raise your hand function.
Okay, and does anyone have any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar? We're all good?
Correction, no, okay.
No? Okay,
So the only thing I wanted to say is in the consent calendar, we do have approved current consent for claims. And I don't have specific objection, I have questions.
okay, then we'll need to separate that out so you can ask questions. Okay, so consent for claims will deal separately. Any other changes? Okay, they'll move on. Number 5, comments from the audience, opportunity to address the board on items that are not part of the agenda. Eric, are you
One
checking?
hand up. Matt said he might not make it in person, so he's online.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Thanks for the time. Yeah, I would have liked to have made it down there, but got a little stuff going on right now, which is awesome. So wanted to first echo Eric's comments. Happy Veterans Day, and thank everyone for their service. And it's a beautiful one out there. Just got off the hill, and we are ready to go for tomorrow. Chair 5 runs look great. And who knows? We're trying to see if we can get some more terrain for everybody, but it should be a nice, strong start. We're really trying to emphasize the message. We did this a little bit last year and have tried to, but I want to double down on it. Our goal is to open up as much terrain as quickly and as safely as possible. So you may see that. Last year, the example was Chair 4. We had a ton of snow, and there was snow everywhere except for the very top of the lift. So we had to do a lot of work to get snow to the unload, and we showed a picture of that. And we had the same situation at the top of 6 this year. Luckily, we have the ability to make some snow up there, so crews are working hard for the unload and building the ramp, which had no snow. So just if you hear questions about that, but keep your eye out for what it looks like down there. If you see a maze, we may be getting that. Yeah, and just as everyone knows, 50th anniversary for Kirkwood. Excited to celebrate that. Can't think of a better way than to start early. I did the count. This tomorrow will be day 1 of 170 days scheduled for the season, as we're scheduled to go through April 30th. So also excited to nail down and commit to kind of what I view as a normal time frame for us and a normal closing, operating through April. Who knows, if we have a big year, maybe it extends beyond that. A few things I just wanted to share with everybody. Our staffing, as I know, no one's been immune to staffing challenges over the last couple of years, and it hit us pretty hard last year, most notably in F&B. And with our bump from $15 to $20 per hour, we've seen and other efforts. Our staffing is going really well so far this year. We got to make sure everybody shows up, and those that we don't provide beds to can find housing, but we're tracking really well. We had 100% of the people that were supposed to show up for F&B training earlier this week show up, and I don't know that that's ever happened. So good signs. That's going to allow us. We opened Kirkwood Inn on Saturday for the season, for the winter. So our commitment to operate that both summer and winter is starting off well. That'll alternate with the Cornice once that opens. Kirkwood Inn will be open Wednesday through Sundays, and then the Cornice will be available on Mondays and Tuesdays when that opens up, probably at some time in December as we onboard people. But it'll be great to get that back going as well. We haven't operated that the last 2 years due to staffing. And then the Sunrise Grill will be back as well when we open the backside. So hopefully that's welcome news to everyone, and getting back to kind of our full array of F&B offerings. I'm really excited about that. We'll get the meadow going as soon as we get more snow. We need a little bit more we gotta get the culverts in, and then just a little bit more snow to pad out the meadow. And then I'm excited we're going to be able to get across 88 for the cross country center. We're able to get Forest Service approval, and we got trees down, hazard trees down, and we'll have just about the majority of the Caples Creek area and some good loops back there. And then once that happens, we'll be able to assess over snow and with a snowcat the connection up to Schneider Camp. If we can get that and get cats back and forth between the two, we might be able to get the whole system back online this winter. So hopefully that's welcome news to everybody. And as we know more about that, we'll share that. But at the very least, getting across 88 and getting those trails going will be good to see. The other things that been kind of sharing, I think we all know from a parking standpoint, obviously a big focus and challenge for all of us. And, we're at a point where big impactful parking initiatives are not easily achievable. It's not that they're not out there, but a lot of work to look at where that might go. So in the meantime, focusing our team on, okay, what can we do? So obviously the expansions along the Loop Road and Upper 7 and are pretty much complete there. We will have the Upper 9 lot, Chair 9 lot back this year. We weren't sure if the Timber Creek townhomes were going to get started in earnest. So we'll have that lot. So that'll help us a little. And then we're going to be putting out, this isn't starting this weekend, but what we're calling a paid carpool initiative for the entire village lot around Chair 6 and the VIP lot. And, the goal there is if somebody comes with 4 or more people in a car, it'll be free. And then the price will slowly go up if you have 3, 2, or a single person in the car and want to park in those lots. So we're hoping that'll drive more carpooling as we kind of get out of the COVID environment and there's more comfortability around that. So we'll get that started a little bit later, but it's kind of a little bit of a test and learn for us there. But wanted to try to tackle this in a bunch of different ways to reduce cars. And then we've got some meetings coming up with Caltrans and CHP. Last year we saw, and I got plenty of feedback from folks, especially in East Meadows, where we had some folks going out to 88 that way, but the parking on 88 as spots were, or the shoulder was cleared completely where somebody could park within the white line and not be on the road, I think caused issues downstream. Number one, I'm not comfortable with our guests parking on 88 and walking, even if it's just past KMD in between the Kirkwood Inn and KMD. It's just not a great experience. I don't think it's safe. And then I think that kind of propelled people and said, oh, we can keep parking. And on certain days, you all may have seen it or heard people parking up into the ice box and up on Capel Spillway, et cetera, and walking down. So just not something that I'd rather, if we have to turn people away or ask them to come back in an hour or so when parking opens back up, than to have them have that experience. It's just not safe. So I'm not sure what we'll be able to do. We got to work with CHP and Caltrans on that, but we've got a few ideas we're going to run by, and just wanted to share with the community that we're focused on that, and not just, hey, how many cars and people can we jam in here? Yeah, other than that, just a lot of catch up on maintenance. So it was great to have a full summer with no fires and no COVID, and a lot of stuff behind the scenes. But obviously, a few things that you all may have seen already with the cat crossings. And I appreciate Chief Ansel. He and I talked about that in the summer. He brought it up, and it was on our list, especially the one across Loop Road. Was pretty bad with rebar and not good for any vehicles, especially emergency vehicles. So it's glad to be able to get that done, and just appreciated the feedback. It reaffirmed that that was and should be a top priority on our list for the road. So would continue to welcome that. Obviously not going to be able to say yes to everything, but hopefully I can say, if I can't say yes, it's maybe a not yet, and we can put it on the plan for future instead of just a flat no. But I'll commit to having the conversation and being transparent. So with that, I know you guys have a lot on your agenda. I'll kind of I'll stop there. If there's anything on your mind or questions that they have, happy to field those.
Just a short question. How many extra parking slots did you create this year?
Yeah, good question. We think we'll be able, between the two lots, get somewhere between 80 and 100. To be honest with you, the upper 7, as we look at it, we've got to test out just how the rows will actually fit in there versus design. But design, it could be upwards of 100. Which would be impactful when we look at how many cars we were counting as we turned away on some of those big days. That'll make a big dent. And so I'm not saying we're not going to park out at all, but pretty optimistic that'll help us on several of those days. So TBD until we get some cars in there and actually test it all out. But the team feels pretty good with what we're seeing as a result.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt, for the update. Appreciate it. And it's exciting to start the year with good news.
For sure.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments in the audience?
I don't see any others.
Okay, then let's move on to the adoption of the consent calendar for 7A, B, and D minutes, the 2 minutes, and the receivable shut-off report. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, Doug seconds. Roll call, please.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell-Rhonda,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Thornburg, aye.
Okay, let's move on now to 7C, approval of consent for claims. Bertrand, you had some questions.
So on the AP vote voucher, so on page 22, there is a Qualcomm hydrant meter refund. Can you explain do people have to pay a deposit?
Yes.
So it's just a refund of the deposit?
Just like it reads, just a refund. Yep.
It's a refund minus whatever
Usage.
cost there is.
Yeah. And second question is, so I see that you have a pump.
What page? Same page?
23. You have a heat pump now?
Yes.
Is this a mini split?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a mini split.
We have
And do you know what
there's
they can-
4 units and 4 units, 1 condenser.
And which brand?
Bryant.
Okay,
And then we will be reporting back probably around March or April when we actually have electric
Yeah.
usage data.
but so far you're able to heat the office with that.
No, it works better in some places than others. My office, it does not work as all.
Okay. Well.
But the other 3
this is
seems to be-
beyond the consent of region.
Yes,
So the last thing is, so I see that there was some
Still
dollar,
Still page 23.
page 24.
Thank you.
there is some bollard that has been done on KMD. I'm supposing this is what it is here.
Say,
My question is,
say that word again.
page 24,
Bollards.
Sierra Taomix.
Oh, no. Sierra Tower, yes, that was for the powerhouse gates.
Okay,
And then 2 bollards on KMD. We did them at the same time.
and so what happened there? I'm just curious about why did they have to?
They got-
They were hit by
The
someone?
bollards, the
Yeah.
bollards were hit.
Oh. So in that case, the culprit is actually involved in paying part of it or not?
If we catch them, yes.
Okay, so you don't know.
And if there's giant snow plow or blower marks on it from Vale's equipment, then yes.
Yeah, okay.
But otherwise, we have to catch them doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was wondering if there was an accident or if it was something different.
Every year, a hydrant or 2 gets hit and a bollard or 2 gets hit. It just happens.
And then page 26, I see that there is a well that has a snowmaking meter that's been installed. And is that in line with the discussion we had earlier this
Yes.
summer?
That's the Timber Creek snowmaking meter. Yeah.
Yeah, so now we have a meter for that thing, and it's only charged for water, not for sewage. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. So that's a question, a clarification. I wanted to understand what they were. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Is there a motion to approve the consent for claims then?
I will.
Okay, Bertrand moves, a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Epstein.
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitteranda,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Robert, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, then we'll move on to item 9A, finances, and welcome Tommy.
Thank you.
An
I
historic first time.
greatly appreciate it. And if it's historic for getting as much snow too, it'll be a good luck. So I just wanted to do something different. John and Eric both recommended that we do a little cover letter for the finances, try and answer any questions ahead of time so we can keep the ball rolling as much as possible. So I built on here, which in the future will be in the front of the packet for the finances, but just breaking out exactly what funds everything is, what they correlate to. If you dug down deep, you'll notice that G&A allocations were not done yet. And that is throwing off a lot of those expenses versus budget. So that's a lot of the things you're seeing in there. But any other things that were in there, I'll note on this page, like the commercial base rates for the wastewater that I know have been spoken of repeatedly. One of the questions that was in the last meeting was, what is other revenue built up of? It's built up of penalties, depending on fund, as well as fire assessment and employee housing rent. We got that large payout for the in Fund 40 for employee housing for the Meadows unit when we sold that. But then you also note that I said on Fund 90 solid waste is employee salaries and wages is higher due to chipping costs. But I'll start building this in the future. Is there any questions specifically that isn't covered by this?
On the numbers,
Yeah.
I do, yeah.
What are they?
Okay, let me get ready.
Ready?
Okay, I think this is page 42. Honestly, responding to your, I appreciate the introduction, but one thing I really appreciate when Kelly was doing it, she was highlighting the most pertinent event, I call that, in the various page, and I thought it was very useful to actually save time, because this is a lot of number, so we can focus on what actually is material instead of just incidental. So I hope you're still going to do that, actually. I don't know what other board members think about that.
Well, I think that if there's unique things, we're going to put them on that front page So most everything that's anomalous on all the other pages was addressed in the front page and all it
Okay.
stems from G&A. So I imagine that's going to be the answer, but let's go.
Okay, so now on page 42. So I noticed that the commercial base rate went through the roof for the wastewater.
Yeah, so his cover page actually answered that question.
Okay, I didn't see the
Okay.
page, so, okay.
And that had to do with the catch up that we talked about multiple times over the last
With the
couple
what?
months. It had to do with the PCS error. We've talked about this for
Okay,
2 months in a
yes.
row,
Yes, I remember that.
and that's why that's so high.
So, okay, so this is the explanation of that, okay.
And it was on the cover page too.
Well,
Uh,
maybe Eric, as a recommendation, have that like see page 42 something to then correlate the cover page. Then that
Sure.
way, when this, maybe that's a good way of referencing it.
Except for I don't number it until I have the,
Yeah.
until I have the whole
Well,
packet put
you could do it
together.
by
That sounds
title.
like a you problem.
Referred,
It is a big problem, yes. I
but
agree.
just, I think it's an idea, to just do it by title and say the wastewater
Yeah.
fund, commercial rates are high.
Yeah, there you go. We can do it
because-
by the title at the top of the. page.
Yeah,
There you go, Tom.
because I don't want to
That's
make it
great.
harder to do it.
Yep,
That would
easy
be
peasy.
helpful to just link it.
And that'll be easy to do. So that'll definitely be done next
And
time.
this is going to be true every single month,
Correct.
yes,
right?
For the next 3 years.
for the year, but not for
3
the
years.
months.
Every month.
Every month, this
It'll
will
be
be
off.
this- until we get to
30,
July.
26 months.
26.
It'll be
thank
2
you.
years before that drops off.
But it'll match budget.
Yeah, so it's a
Except
mass,
for we have the catch. I guess we could put the catch up in the budget.
Yeah.
Next year. Yeah, correct.
That might be an anomaly. Well, let me,
All right, we
Yeah.
might.
let's
I
talk
think
about that.
we could
Okay.
adjust the budget next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Other
then.
questions?
Yes, I do. Page 44. It may be also in your summary, but I didn't see your summary actually, because I went straight from the calendar to the numbers. So I missed your page. I apologize for that. So I may be redundant, but that's okay. Page 44, let me get that. There is a 57% increase on the cost of gold sold. So if I remember correctly, in September, we had to run the generators because of the heat wave and the grid crisis, I can say. And I think PG&E requests that we actually start running the generators. So my question is that cost of goods sold difference of 18K basically due to the fuel, or if not, what it is? Why are we off budget this month, yeah, in September?
Tommy, was that timing of invoices on that one?
I'm trying to think of that one. I believe, yeah, that would be the difference in a Shell invoice just coming a little bit early.
So Shell is
And-
it's for
and-
electricity.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
we buy our electricity and sometimes the invoices come at a certain date, sometimes they come 2 days later,
Okay.
and that'll shift quite significantly.
So we should see the opposite impact on the months
In
either
October.
before or after. Okay, so we'll check on that. So can you remind me, you agree with that, Eric, that during the crisis of heat wave crisis, we had to shut down, basically to run the powerhouse?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were using fuel for that.
Yeah, but I don't think that's where
That's a
diesel
different
shows up.
story, yeah. But I just want to make sure that I'm recollecting properly.
There was production in July and in October
Oh, it was
because
in
of this.
October, yeah.
It wasn't, yeah. It shows up in October in the performance report.
The next thing is page 48. That's solid waste. And here we have 44% expense less this time
On
in
what line item?
September. And I just wonder to know, is that also a billing issue?
Is that, are you talking about it, operating expenses?
Let me look. Page 48, it's 44% less. It should be written somewhere.
I think he's talking about operating expenses,
I
Tommy.
believe so, and that's what I was
Yeah,
covered
it's 40%,
in,
yes.
in that cover letter, that G&A allocations, which if you see 3 lines up from that is normally 7,257 budgeted, hasn't been entered. And that is it's about 3,000 difference between that and the variance. So that would account for the heavy majority of that, 70% of that, 44%.
I'm not following you here.
So the G&A had not been reconciled since July.
I
And so,
understand that.
and so the G&A allocations are not there. So that's why there's a negative 7,000 difference.
Correct.
That's the bulk of the 44%
Yeah,
you're
but-
asking about.
But on operation and maintenance, we also have a 6,000 difference.
That's probably because, go ahead, Tommy.
So that's the one I was inquiring about, actually.
Okay, so not the 44% like you
It's not the
said.
G&A, yeah. It's
Okay,
the
so-
operation and maintenance.
And I don't know that answer off the top of my head. It's probably due to the same thing, but it could also just be, I mean, that's under budget. So that could just be, we were very frugal that month, which is great.
Well, that's where our tips come in too, are under there. So
Okay.
we may have had less tips.
Less people in the valley.
My guess would be less tips personally, because there's been no one in the valley in the month of September.
Well, we'll actually come back and discuss this in 9F
Yeah,
and the fact that we overachieved. So,
okay. That's it. That's,
okay. Any other questions or comments from finance? All right, why don't we move on to October preliminaries?
And I can tell you real quick, because I did just look that up. Yes, it is dumpsters. That is 6,500, which is budgeted at 15,000. So that is indeed less dumpster tips.
You catch that, Bertrand? It was less dumpsters. So
okay.
that was what that's why the O&M was so low.
Did we have a lower occupancy in September? That's what
Less
happened?
people with garbage, at least.
And we were pretty hell on contractors making sure they had their own dumpsters and weren't putting their rubbish in our customers' dumpsters.
Okay.
Okay, so continue with October preliminary at page 49.
Anything you want to highlight here, Tommy?
Any other questions on? October
I was just
preliminary?
asking Tommy if you have anything you want to point out on the preliminary income for October.
Not particularly. I
Okay,
mean, we're, yeah. Unless there's any questions.
Eric. Yeah.
I just saw this, I'm just curious to know if the 600,
I can't hear the question.
I see it, variance accurate.
He's asking if the 600,000 variance is accurate, and that Tommy, which I think goes back to the
Yeah,
G&A issue that we were talking about.
No, and
No?
this would be more of a budgeting versus actual. I mean, it was hard because the last 2 years were so high and we do a 5-year budget. And so that'll inflate everything and make us want to expect bigger commercial rates and residential rates. The base rate should be consistent, as Bob and I were speaking of, but the main thing is that 5-year average is kind of fluctuating because of COVID and the fire before that.
Well, I noticed that in September was $65,000 variance.
Can't hear the question again.
I'll work.
Tommy, I just realized my question that I'd asked you earlier today is actually was in October, not in September, because in September, commercial base rates were above plan and now they're below. So I suspect there's something off.
And
on
it's
this
probably, it is probably a timing issue. I mean, we're trying to catch up with everything and reconciling. So these are definitely preliminaries and they are definitely not finalized. So I get the earlier question was whether these are official. These are not official.
He has 3 months of reconciling to
Yeah.
catch up on what wasn't done before he took over. So we're trying to get
Right.
that done.
So I'm assuming in the October preliminary that you are not updating the operating expenses. It's just the revenue that you are.
Yeah, we've never
Yeah.
updated
Yeah.
the operating ever in a preliminary income.
Correct,
You just throw the budget number in there.
correct. Because not all expenses are obviously in for October yet.
I just wonder if it would be better to put a dash
To what?
to put a dash instead of duplicating the budget for operating expenses. It's kind of misleading here. It looks like we have a number, but actually, if you don't have operating expense, your total operating is actually meaningless.
It just shows you what it would be if it was at budget.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If you showed it as 0, it would.
it's
be
preliminary.
off.
That's fine.
Okay, why don't we move on then to cash flow?
Cash flow is up. We know we'll always have, as John pointed out, I mean, our lowest time of cash flow is in December, which is still $1 million that we have to cover all of our expenses. So it's fantastic. But yeah, we're at 1.4 in October. Any questions of that?
Okay, and then budget variance you've already covered.
And we'll do that in the front next time.
Okay,
So everyone can kind of see those things ahead of time, and I'll point out and I'll put what funds those are. Yeah, I can't do page numbers because I don't want to be misleading, but I'll try and be as clear as concise as possible.
okay, thank you. Move on to 9B, performance reporting.
Hi, everyone.
Aye.
So starting with performance reporting for electric, we had a production in October, total of 441,000 kilowatt hours. As you pointed out, this was the month that we were on generators several times because of the grid instability and also some PG&E maintenance. So you'll see that we did produce 22,000 kilowatt hours at the powerhouse. Our losses for the month were 20% unidentified losses, which brings us year to date to 20%. There were some previous questions about were these numbers higher than normal, and they do seem high to me also, but we have to remember this is our time of year where we're not selling very many kilowatt hours, so our losses do seem larger than normal. If you look at last year's performance report also, we were right at 20% this time last year too. But I would like to note that we are having some issues with the electric meter at the wastewater treatment plant. It's one of the things that we are going to ask Stantec to look at with us during the wastewater treatment plant improvements that are happening next year. Any questions on electric before I move on to propane?
Yeah, so my recollection, the heat wave was in September, correct? And that's when we had grid instability. So you are showing up October, so that's why I'm confused.
Honestly, it's
KISO
kind of all been a blur. I could go back and check the dates.
the KISO demand, the cut was in July.
Yes.
And in October, we had other issues
Operational.
that were
issues,
not
PG&E.
related to the California grid.
Right, it was PG&E was doing operations and maintenance.
And then we
everything
had
on-
to cut off for some time in order to deal with.
Correct.
Yeah, but okay.
So I think the Cal ISO requirement to
Yes.
shed was in July.
It was in July.
I think so.
Time challenge.
I believe that's correct, but then PG&E always does maintenance around October.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah.
So we always go, so that's,
Yeah.
part of that is that, part of
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
some other things that were going on in the valley that we had to deal with.
I was convinced that we had something in September with a heat wave, which we had in September for sure, but it is what it is.
I just looked, Bertrand, you are correct. The heat wave shutdown was actually end of August, early September. So my guess here is, since we had some turnover at the powerhouse, that our powerhouse production numbers just got caught up in October, that the generator data was collected to that point. But you're right, we did have several days that we had to run
there you go.
early September.
I thought I had a senioritis moment.
I guess I did. Okay.
I had to go back and look. Like I said, this summer has just we've really been running, so.
Yeah.
If we look at propane, I don't know whether to be happy or not, but we do have a positive loss in propane for the second month in a row, which just means that, you know, we're selling less propane and we're having some that we have not accounted for. Our year-to-date is at 3%. And as I think probably all of you know at this point, we have very large swings in propane performance reporting because of the pressure and the temperature impacts on our propane levels. So we're at a positive 3% right now. I expect that to swing around for the rest of the year, but it's similar to where we were last year also, which was at 2%. Moving on to water. For water, you can see that we produced about 515,000 gallons from our wells. We had various district facility uses. We had some hydrant and sample flushing, and we have a 27% unidentified loss for the year. We will be seeing some last of the season hydrant meters coming in probably in November, because there were still a few hydrant meters out and metering usage at the end of October. And then lastly, wastewater. Our wastewater treatment plant at the influent meter measured 391,000 gallons. Overall, that was a 10% unidentified loss, not loss, excuse me, INI, so infiltration into the system, bringing it to 11% for the year. And like I mentioned, we do have last year's in there so you can compare. We also have the monthly aquifer level information that is normally included, as well as the historical water, propane, and electric usage graphs.
Yes, thank you. It's actually very helpful for reference. I'd just like to make a comment on the consumptions, actually, because I'm keen to check electrical consumptions to see if somehow our electrical usage is going to crank up based on more people charging cars, and now that we have a lower usage rate. And if you look at electric usage, it doesn't show actually any progress. However, if you look at propane and water consumption, it actually, October was a fairly low occupancy. So I don't think it's totally out of question. So we'll see with this time, but it is not depressing, but annoying to see that we are stuck at the same level of electrical consumption. Since our model is that we need to expand.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention, Brandy and Tommy and I looked at this data together, and one of the things observed is actual metered isn't really what's showing there, it's total billed. And so if there's a meter problem and somebody was undercharged in 1 month and then moved into another, it perturbs this. And so there are perturbations that happen every month just from billing corrections and things of that sort.
Yeah, but over time, with the new rate structure that we have, we'd like to see some cranking.
Yeah, we would. I'm just saying that a variation from month to month can also occur just because of a billing correction that occurs in 1 month. And you don't want to take it out because it was over or underreported in the time when it happened. So that was just one other thing we observed. Okay, thanks.
One comment on saying maybe it'd be worthwhile to have 1 more year to have a little more data point to try to see trends.
On the
now
charts?
we have basically 3. It's difficult to see a trend for a year that's not complete, and it's 4 when we actually have done that part of the fiscal year. But I think.
Do you mean on these bar charts?
Yes,
you want another
exactly.
year? We can add.
If you could add one extra
Yeah, that's
year,
easy.
Maybe give
Sure.
a better sense of trends.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Thanks, Brandy. Propane meter update, shed update.
Yes, so we do have good news on this front also. People are continuing to get sheds built or sign agreements. Last month, we were at 51% built to standard. We're up to 55%. And what you see here is the residential overview. So we do still have in December and January, 27 people that are in the low category, which means that they could sign a waiver and get an extension, excuse me, they could sign a waiver and either choose to do something at a later date or keep the waiver in place. We plan to send out additional notifications and contact these customers starting next week so that we can hopefully get these knocked out. There is one residential meter on the high list in January, and I know that customer has contacted a contractor and is trying to get that resolved as well. So it's still slow going and it's still difficult, but I think Tommy handled this nicely while he was in electric propane, and we're continuing to move on this. Commercial is not on this sheet, but we do have 6 commercial entities that are low rated. So we'll be looking for an agreement from them by January. And there are 2 that are rated high, and both of those are due in February, and both of them have made significant construction strides. They're not complete yet, but they're in progress. So we have a new electric propane project manager over there, John Campbell, who I'm sure you'll meet soon. He is going to be taking over this, so there will be another transition here, but we are trying to make sure that we continue our communication and get this wrapped up as soon as we can.
Okay, any questions? All right, move on to the SSMP annual audit.
And there is a staff report from Derek Thornbrook in here. This is something that he does annually. It's required by our permit for the wastewater treatment plant. And basically we have a SSMP, which is a sewer system management plan. He is required to do a self-audit, which is included here, present it to the board. And if the board approves, then he will submit that to the state. So the audit is here for your review. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay, any questions on the report?
The only comment we had, Brandy, was from Doug, and there was one table that no data was missing, but it was outside the boundaries, the margins. So we'll just want to correct that before we finalize it. But it's just a formatting issue. No data is missing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Absolutely.
Which page is that?
67.
Table 3. Mhm.
There's nothing in those other columns.
Just a cosmetic issue on page 69. There is a 0 missing for debris for 2022. I'm assuming it's 0 because it shows 0 in another table. So page 69, table 4.
Got it. So we'll add that. We'll correct that.
All right, well, as long as we're doing that on page 74. I wasn't going to bother, but I feel I need to compete. On page 74, the label in the second row is cut off. Table 7.
74.
I saw it.
70, 74 in
Gotcha.
the,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, we'll correct
All
that
right,
as
I
well.
mean, this just proves the board has studied this in detail.
Mhm.
And thank you. I will get all those comments back to Derek.
I will take formatting corrections all day long versus us having a stake in here of importance. So I
All right.
much appreciate those.
Okay, fair enough. Are there any other comments or not?
The good news is we haven't had a lot of blockages.
It's really good.
It's a big improvement over
Yeah.
2018.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that's something positive.
is there a motion to approve the You want a resolution, right? Eric?
Just a motion to approve it.
Motion to
Is it
approve.
adopted or approve it, Brandy? I think
It's approve it.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the
I
report? Okay, moved by Bertrand. Is a
I'll second.
second?
I'll second.
Doug seconds. Okay, roll call.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
All right.
Perot,
Aye.
Thornburg, aye.
Okay, good. We'll move on to item 9E, low-income housing priority policy.
This is just a cleanup from 2006. I just happened to be at a meeting of multiple general managers from other water agencies, and one just got caught with not having updated this plan. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, you should have adopted in 2006. So sure enough, I went back through old emails, talked to district council. They did advise the district in 2006 to adopt this, was never done. So we need to adopt this, and then every 5 years hence, update it.
And this is providing water connection and access priority for low-income. Okay,
Correct.
Which hopefully we'll have again sometime.
we have to comply.
Does TriTac still insist on continuing with the deed restriction on commercial housing projects, or has that been eliminated?
I don't, that's not part of this at all.
Well,
don't-
I mean, it would
I don't know.
potentially be.
That'd be a
I'm just
question.
at-
Yeah, no, that'd be a question for TriTac. I don't know whether they're tracking it or
Because
not.
the only way
I
we're
haven't
gonna get
been,
low income housing.
I
is
haven't been
through-
very, I haven't seen a lot of evidence that it's being actively tracked annually.
Okay,
The
that's,
last report Rick and I saw was probably 2008.
right, before the building boom collapsed. Right?
So I don't know, but they may be maintaining it, but that'd be a TriTac question.
Okay,
So realistically, the only way this is relevant to us is if we, if either the district or the resort does some new employee housing.
It would have to
basically.
be true, not employee housing, true
Low
low
income.
income housing. It's not
Well,
the
I
same.
mean, realistically, I'm talking about in our valley, that's the only thing that would apply.
Yeah, this
Can't see
will,
a senior home.
this will
center
never apply to,
coming in.
this will never apply to Kirkwood. This would be a low income housing development all by itself.
that's
plop
priced
down.
below market.
It's
for-
priced below
for-
market. This will never happen in Kirkwood because
Yeah,
of,
so
the-
lava, if we did another lava rock, it wouldn't.
No.
You need a developer that decide to do
yeah.
something cheap.
I wouldn't want to lose too much. This is a requirement for
No,
us
I'm
by
not
law.
arguing.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just trying to see. how
It-
this-
Yeah,
This is,
it's
so
never
Peter,
gonna be.
this is a very specialized program that, I mean, for example, they've waived all CEQA on low income housing projects that would qualify under this and utilities, and there's nothing zoned low income housing in Kirkwood.
Right.
The only thing they could take over was possibly the school site. But anyway, because of, I think the specific plan has provisions for employee housing. I mean, it could happen, I guess, but I'd be
Could
very
have a senior
surprised.
center someday.
That would be a very different project, not a low income housing one, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one either. I think it's called KCA.
So is it cooking that we smell or something is burning?
So I've been smelling it.
That
I've
was a
smelled it for a
bagel.
while. Sorry.
No,
It's
I
probably,
mean,
it's probably a bagel in the
It's a
kitchen.
bagel.
okay.
Okay.
Our employees
all
are
right,
the best
but
at it.
but we digress.
But-
Okay, can I have a motion to approve resolution 22.-05?
Yeah, I'll move to approve. it.
Okay. Peter moves, second. Okay, Doug seconds. Roll call, please.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Thornburg, aye.
Oh, but just one thing I just forgot to mention, not related to that specifically, but that's like the second item that we talked about in committee about like things that we didn't know, because there was stuff regarding electric that we're finding out that we didn't know about as well. And so we discussed in the committee that at some point we might want to think about budgeting time or money
Right.
to thinking about what are other things that we might not know about from historic, you know.
That would be the unknown knowns.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
I think what came out of finance was that we will consider and recommend to the board retaining district council to go through all of our policies, ordinances, regulations, and rules and make sure that every single one is up to date and current. As new stuff's been coming in for the last 5 years I've been here, you've seen all the stuff I've brought to the board, these onesie twosie things we have to adopt.
Mhm.
1383 is a great example. We had to bring that back. So at least we're caught up in the last 5, but prior to that, we should probably have a full forensic analysis. It's not going to be cheap either, but it's probably overdue. I found some old ordinances that don't apply anymore. So a lot of things to be cleaned up for sure. So,
Okay.
but we'll bring that back to the board with hopefully with the price tag, and then the board can make a decision if they want to do that next fiscal year.
Okay,
Is that a good
good.
summary, Doug?
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Doug. We'll move on to 9F, solid waste rate increase.
Right. We were informed by ACES of 2 things. One is a fuel surcharge, a temporary fuel surcharge on our rate, on their rates to us, and then the annual CPI increase and any other governmental effects on them. They're allowed to do that under contract. Everybody's struggling with this. I know that this has already been gone through Amador County, City of Sutter Creek, City of Ione, not City of Jackson yet. But they've all been approved because it's basically out of their control. The good side of the increase, I guess, if there is a good side, is that we upped our solid waste rates based on our increased tip amounts, which you see later down in this table. We've gone back to our pre-COVID norms in terms of tips. So we actually, for the first time ever, ran a surplus in solid waste last fiscal year. So overall, cutting to the chase, the anticipated increases for Mesa was 16.25%. We had about a 20% surplus last year. Shipping's taking about 4% of our budget, 3.8. So we should finish about 6.2% better than budget, which is 0.05% difference. Therefore, staff and finance committee believe the existing rates are sufficient and do not recommend a rate increase. But we did want to bring this to the board's attention in case the board has a different idea and does want to do a rate increase.
Okay. John, do you have any additional comments from the finance committee?
No, we talked about, should we have an increase to potentially have increases be more smooth over time, but we already do a CPI increase anyway. So I think this is the right course to take, and it's nice to not be having to pass on more cost to the customer.
I agree. Any other discussion?
On the merit of, I do agree. I just would like to make one more comment. I noticed that in October we had only 17 tip, which is totally correlating with low propane and low water usage last month.
Right. Yeah, very true. I mean, if you're up here, it's been a ghost town, except for the contractors, but they're not staying there for the most
Which is a
part.
good sign for electricity.
Yeah. But I will note that most of the contractors have not been staying in Valley, which is a bit unusual. Usually they'll rent at the Meadows or at the Lodge through Vail Housing. We really haven't seen that as much as we have in prior years. And I don't know what the reason for that is, if it's the pricing or what, but just something to consider. I mean,
Well, they were bringing trucks back and forth, so they'd have to go back down to the valley at the end of the night.
Yeah.
I think that's,
but Q&D had 20 guys up here
yeah.
that weren't, you're right, though. The end dumps were going back. Absolutely correct. But
Okay, so I'll just assume the board consensus is to leave rates alone.
yeah, I mean, if there's no action the board wants to take, that we're just going to leave it as is. Again, it's just, the board should be made aware of these things. I think that was my only thought.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the fire department service recovery schedule. Eric, I assume you'll lead that?
Yes, I will. So as discussed in the finance committee, in 2008, the board approved a service agreement with a company called Fire Recovery USA to try to reimburse the fire department on emergency calls that were outside of the Kirkwood Valley. And initially, the program was actually pretty successful, but over the years, it sort of slipped away, and due to multiple reasons, we weren't able to continue the relationship. I was recently approached by Fire Recovery as well as just trying to figure out how to get more revenue for the fire department. And basically just, I would like to reestablish the relationship with the Fire Recovery to try to recoup some of the costs. So before the board today is a resolution is 2006. Which one is it? Oh, 2206. Yeah.
2206.
It used to be 05. I picked the wrong number originally. It's 2206. And essentially it's just reaffirming our relationship with Fire Recovery USA. We would also sign a service agreement with them. And then I would direct the fire department to try to gain as much information on scene to start billing for calls. And with that, I open it up for discussion.
One clarification, Rick, that you made at the finance committee, but this would not apply to Kirkwood residents that pay the assessment.
That is correct. This is trying to obtain reimbursement for calls for folks that don't currently live or reside in the Kirkwood Valley.
So Rick, just as an opening question, I'm not sure I understand who Fire Recovery USA is. Are they purely a financial
Yes.
agent that
Or
tries to
private.
collect from one source and then reimburses us?
Just imagine a bill collector. That's basically what they are.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Sophisticated one.
And it's a company that, again, we used in the past and
Mhm.
had a good relationship with, and it is currently being used by other departments that are near us, including Lake Valley.
All
And
right,
if-
so I just want to say, so if Mr. X is on 88 and has an accident, we go out and assist. Based on what the assistance is, we would ask Fire Recovery USA to recover this fixed amount.
Yes,
Is that what happens?
yes.
Okay.
That's if they are out of our jurisdictions or always.
If that is any call we respond to, if they are not a Kirkwood homeowner.
Yeah.
Or
But
property
not a
owner,
Kirkwood homeowner.
Kirkwood property owner. If they pay the assessment,
Okay.
so if they pay the square footage assessment, we are not going, this would not apply to them.
But yeah, no, okay.
Okay.
So there's a minimum charge, right? That's my understanding, Rick, that there's a minimum charge whether we bill somebody, ask for a bill or not.
Uh,
Do you expect that this will pay for itself and not be a liability?
There's no cost to the district or the fire department now. We're just trying to, again, recoup costs that may occur. And then on page, I think it's 90 in the board packet is where it starts the list of fees and
Right.
recovery costs.
I noticed in the contract that I don't remember what page it was, but that whether we bill somebody or not, there's a minimum monthly charge. Is that correct? Or am I erroneous there?
The charge to the fire department? I don't believe
Yeah.
so. I mean, there was
I
if
thought
there's
it
a,
was part of the contract. I
There's a
saw that
pers-
somewhere.
there's a percentage they will retain on all calls monthly. I know
Right,
I'm aware of that, but I don't
I
remember.
thought there was a minimum charge of $235 a month, even if there were no bills requested.
If you could tell us what that was, that'd be great.
Yeah, I don't.
Would be, I didn't write down the page number, unfortunately.
Well, we could certainly look at that, but either way, I think
You think it'll pay for itself?
What'd
on
you
one,
say? What'd you say, Rick? $8,000 to $10,000 when we were doing this before?
yeah, in the first year, and
Versus
then
what'd you say, 200 a month versus $1,400?
I just know how, historically, it's sometimes difficult to get
2,400.
information from somebody that's been in a car accident or some kind of an incident.
right.
And we've had trouble getting, at one point, Amador County used to reimburse us, didn't they?
They pay our workers comp.
Yeah,
They
okay.
still do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we have a relation, an agreement with the Amador Fire Protection District for each call, a percentage each call.
And you think that the fire department will be able to gather information enough so that we can send out bills?
I can't guarantee every call we'll be able
Yeah.
to gather all the information, but in the last year, I think there's been at least 10 calls that we could have easily gotten the information and been billed, could have billed on.
And then what's the rate of recovery?
It,
at this-
it really depends on how much information you can get, but this is, when we first started this with fire recovery, we were one of the first fire departments to do this. And it was a pretty good rate on return. They've since built their business quite a bit. So I think it's becoming more widely known and accepted, and the insurance companies aren't fighting it as much. They just know it's out there.
Okay,
So,
yeah, that's another question I had.
but this,
And
I
Peter,
just
the only thing
searched-
I could find is on page 98,
98.
D. It says if the fire department does not maintain a minimum of 6 billable runs per year, they'll be subject to a minimal account service fee of $250 annually.
Oh, annually, it was annual?
Yeah.
Okay, well, look,
Yeah. And
So that's-
that's only if we
Yeah.
don't service 6,
sure.
don't have 6 items to service.
And then on
Okay.
102, the contract just, all I saw was 78% of the monies collected is the reimbursement amount.
Great.
So they collect the
I
22, I guess.
mean, yeah, thank you, Doug. I was going to bring that up as well. And I think the clause in D is probably because of Kirkwood Fire, who didn't bill for calls for about 6 years. But we were still an account, we still had an account with them. So that's probably the Kirkwood clause.
Okay, are there other questions for Rickman? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve 22-06.
No motion.
Okay, Doug motions. Is there a second?
You'll second that.
Okay,
Thanks.
Peter seconds. Okay, roll call, please.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Perot,
I,
Schomburg, aye.
Okay, we're ready to move on to item 9H, the minimum charge concept. Bertrand, please.
okay, I'm not going to read this, the
You can assume we've all read it.
just, so we did a lot of work on electrical rate, trying to improve structure rate for the financial safety of the district. And in that process, when we start doing that, actually open up, put forward the fact that our rate, we need to look at the fairness of our structure, rate structure. And it's true for electricity, but it's true for all of them. And so the key thing here is, so we are a very remote area with fairly high cost of infrastructure to divide in a small population. And so basically, and it was very obvious when we changed the structure, rate structure for electricity, but everyone should actually pitch in to cover the fixed cost for whatever department we are looking at. And currently we have base fees and usage fee, but often the base fee actually are not sufficient to cover the fixed cost. So basically what I'm proposing here is let's have a look department by department at what our fixed costs are and how we can make sure that everyone benefiting from the infrastructure on a yearly basis. It's constantly available and we have constant cost to maintain it. And so everyone should basically pitch in, and that's what the minimum payment would do basically, without having to try to decipher too much the use case, which can be a headache. And if at the minimum, each department fixed cost should be covered by minimum payment. And then we can discuss if minimum payment should, typically they are covering both base fees and usage fees, but that could be detailed. So that's, I gave a few examples, and basically what I'm proposing here is that the district is looking at all of its utilities and non-utilities actually, and making sure what are fixed costs. And I think in that process, we should start to be a bit more proactive on maintenance. So our infrastructure is aging, and we are not actually being proactive about that. And at some point, we'll have major expenses, for example, in the water distribution or in the propane distribution or whatever else. And I think this should be assessed, budgeted, and all these things are going to bring up true cost of being able to enjoy the service in the valley, and that everyone should pitch in on that front. So this is what I'm proposing, and clearly it's just a general discussion at this stage about that need, and then I guess the financial committee will have to dive in for each department to see how we fare and if we need to adjust and basically or implement such a minimum payment. So all beneficiary of the utilities and other services that we have pay their fair share. And the side effect of that is because currently it's actually the full-time resident and the full-time business. And that includes KMPUD, which is a full-time business with the sewer plant. And that actually, by their usage, actually are subsidizing the people that are seldomly coming. And I think that's a good way to make this rate structure fairer. It has also some benefit, I would say, which is it would make more feasible for people, especially young families, to actually be in the valley, and same thing for employees. If the full-time resident would not have to shoulder so much of the fixed cost. And I'd be happy to answer specific question. Why don't other people comment on that topic, assuming you have read the details I've sent through the packet.
Okay, other board questions? And we'll go to the audience. Comments?
Well, I think Bertrand makes a good point. It's a full-time resident. I think it is a little bit inequitable at this point in time. I think full-timers are paying more than their share, and I think it's worth investigating this and see how it would apply, and you know what we'd have to go through to adopt, make changes in the rates. I mean, that's never a simple process. And I know we just went through a big rate debate, but I think it's worth pursuing in the long run. I would like to see the finance committee and possibly the planning committee come up with some proposals over the next 6 months or so.
Okay. Doug, John, any comments?
I guess one just question is, and I think appreciate you writing this up. I guess one question on structure alone, just because I feel like you talked about fixed charges a lot. So what's the difference? I mean, I know the mathematical difference between a minimum charge and a fixed charge. Why not just change the fixed charge? Because you said this is the impetus is to cover fixed charge. So why is the minimum charge the right mechanism? And I guess even taking a step back, maybe we need to start talking about what's the problem that we're solving beyond a mechanism, because I could see many different mechanisms that we come forward with beyond a minimum charge. And so I guess what I'm going to, I started with that, but then it's like, what are the, protected classes of fairness that we want to consider as a board? Because I think we've talked about low income as a board. And then I think the only thing that's in our rates today are commercial and residential. Is that fair? Like those are only like classes of customer.
Those are the only two
And
classes.
so I'm trying to think about is like, are you proposing that there's a full-time resident class of customer that needs to have a different rate structure? Like I'm trying to understand, like, are we trying to think about this as like program for a class of customer, or are we trying to think about this as a, like, in fairness, what does fairness mean? You know, because you could say condo versus homes or something. There are lots of different fairnesses that we could consider. And you're bringing up full-time versus non. And I'm just trying to think about what are the different classes, I guess.
There is no different class. I don't think we can have different classes. So that by using minimum payment, we are basically putting yes, we could delve into each department and try to put use case. You see how difficult it was for electricity to come up with something. And we actually, the way we've done it, we still have kept part of the bias toward the weekenders, I'm going to call it, but the low occupancy. Yeah. And I think it's a problem for the valley. So I think the valley is not developing as much as it could because young people cannot live here. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to live here with as a full-time resident because of the extremely high cost. Sure. And so I think it'd be beneficial to the valley, that means to everybody, that we actually make it a bit less so expensive for full-time resident, and the minimum payment is a perfect way to do that because it not discriminate between people.
Well, but it does, because it discriminates between people who are full-time, doesn't, right? I mean, that's the whole point of the, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just trying to say, like, any rate design, there are going to be winners and losers. They're all, like, you're moving money from some people to other people, and that's a fact. And so I'm not trying to argue the merits. I'm just trying to understand, because
what is it that you don't understand?
I want you to clarify, like, is the issue with the rate design, like, I could go into a lot of thoughts about the design that we came into and where I think there could have been differences or whatever, but I guess what I'm trying to solve is, what is the problem that we're solving?
The problem we are solving is the fixed costs are not covered by the base fee currently. In most utilities, I don't know for all, but certainly for electricity, that's a fact because of the 0.5 EDU. So what I'm asking is, let's look at each department to make sure that the fixed costs are covered. So people at least come up with a fixed cost. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think the minimum payment is a very elegant way to do it. I know some economists say it's a bit regressive, but we are a fairly homogeneous population here. I don't think there are too many low-income people that are going to suffer from it. And so by having a minimum payment, it actually makes this process much easier than having to redo the small calculation of base fees versus usage fees.
Okay, just 1 second. So John, do you have any comments? And we'll go to the audience.
Yeah, I think this might have merit. I think fairness is kind of hard to use as a complete argument, because different people have different views on what's fair. And certainly the situation of the utility district also has some bearing on that. So that's why there's all these different types of ways to charge, you know, and other districts have gone for, you know, peak use or time of use, all sorts of different ways to balance their future capacity costs, and also try to provide some fairness. So I think this has some merit and we should look at it, but I think I really would prefer to look at it as part of a new rate study. I think we did make improvements, like Bertrand said, that, with the rate study that we did just recently, but there's still other factors in our electric rate structure, I think, that also need to be looked at. So I prefer to take this as input to a new rate study, which should be scheduled in to start maybe 2024, something like that. Eric, is that right?
That'd be correct. We would start at fiscal year 24-25.
Okay. Because you know, it's complex. You know, changing one factor of a rate seems to need to be looked at in the context of the whole rate structure. So.
Okay, I want to go to the audience. Go ahead, Howard.
Okay, so a couple things. First of all, when you were considering the electric rates, I remember when our former president here, Eric, was concerned about the impact on people like Gene Reuter. And when I spoke to her daughter Sheila, she said, "Don't make this about my mother." Well, they're out of the valley.
Yeah.
Why are they out of the valley? They couldn't afford the electric rates. Okay.
They told me it was, I'm gonna interrupt them because I've heard that
Go ahead.
multiple times. But Sheila said it's proximity to a hospital for G.
Okay.
So
There's
not
more-
electric rates.
Okay, there's more than one factor, but when the new rates went into effect, Gene Reuter cried. Okay, I got from her daughter. Gene Reuter cried because of the new electric rates. And I know Eric was hoping that you all would put something into effect that would, have like a low income or something, but it takes time to do things. And I understand wanting to have not open cans of worms every year or every month or every meeting. But I looked at the wastewater rates and I don't think they were done properly. It was a choice between putting the strength factor for commercial on the base charge versus the per gallon charge or per unit charge. And I think it should have been on both. I reviewed the rates. I don't think that was done properly. So I think we did not, I think the commercial is being undercharged personally. And I did wastewater rate studies 40, 45 years ago under California regulation. So I don't think that was done properly. So I would like that to be reevaluated now, not 3 years from now. I think it should be done now. And that would be an appropriate time to look at the concept of the minimum rate. And in terms of fairness, I mean, right now, we have very expensive utilities. For most of us, this is a luxury. It's our second home. I would like to see a community here that could afford to live here a little easier with more reasonable rates. And the concept of a minimum charge, I mean, my family used to belong to a swim and tennis club. And whether you used the restaurant and snack bar or not, you had to use a minimum amount a month or per quarter, or you paid for it anyway. So it's not like a totally foreign concept. We have greatly upgraded the quality of our electricity. That's wonderful. We all remember how bad it was before we had the power line. But now we've made it really expensive. And I think we owe it to the people that want to live here full time. We want to have employees that can live here. I just don't see that it's that complicated. It makes it cheaper. And for those of us that have the luxury of a second home, it's a small additional amount every month.
Yeah.
But it could be pretty significant for a young family trying, or retired people trying to make a go of living at Kirkwood. And yes, there are other factors, being close to a hospital and all that other stuff. But why should this public utility district be pushing people out of here who want to be full-time residents?
Okay, thanks. Any other audience comments? Okay,
Well, I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
Anna Fleur's been waiting quite patiently.
okay, go ahead.
Go. Hello, yes, well, you have to wait patiently because we don't have the option of speaking without being allowed to. Hi, everybody, it's Ann Fleur. I just want us to echo what has been said in that I think the idea behind the last rate study for the electrical was that we had this large fixed cost and it wasn't being covered on a regular monthly basis. And I think we've made some strides towards that, but I think that there's more improvement to be done in the electrical rate realm, and I agree, we should need to verify where the status is of these other services, and that it makes sense for people that are going to have access to that service, that they pay an equal amount as everybody else to cover those base fixed costs. And I also want to emphasize that I think it's critical that there is a healthy maintenance budget included in that, because we need to be able to maintain our systems and figure out why we have 20% line loss. The industry standard is 8 to 15. And so we need to have money budgeted as part of those fixed costs that are evenly distributed throughout all the customer base, to cover those things, so that we can, and in the long run, it'll help reduce the overall costs if we can deal with some of these maintenance issues as well. And I think there's a little confusion about this being something for full-time residents, but I think the key thing is, if you own property up here, if you're a customer up here, you should pay an equal amount as all the full-time or part-time residents or weekenders should all pay an equal amount for the ability to have that service that has a fixed cost associated with it. And then you pay your usage beyond that. So full-timers are going to pay more usage because they're here more. But we'll be able to reduce the usage costs and increase the base costs, so that everybody is paying an equal portion of those, because everybody has the luxury of being able to flip their switch on when they show up.
So let me ask a question, maybe because I think, Anthony, you're right. There is a lot of mention on full-time residents versus not. So let me ask a question, because I feel like it was in your write-up, Bertrand, about like, there's a statement that says full-time residents pay more than non. If that were not true, would you feel the same about this? Because
Let's start with that. At the minimum, we ought to look each department and see what are the true fixed costs. And like Anne-Fleur said, that should include thinking ahead about the management of the system and making sure that our infrastructure stay at the level it needs to be. And that will be the fixed cost. And compare that fixed cost by dividing by the number of customers and see how that compares to the current base fee.
sure.
That's the base one. And then once
Right.
we have that for each department, let's meet again and discuss.
Right, and I think,
Because like Anne-Fleur
Yeah.
said, you'll see that for electricity, I know it's exactly the case. We are not covering 80% we have 80% of fixed cost, and we are not covering 80% of fixed cost with the base fee.
sure. So I mean, I guess,
Look at the number.
I guess I would say though,
The argument is that the full timers should be paying the same or less, because we're going to be using more electricity, and that's
right,
that's
not on the variable
fine,
part.
right?
Yeah.
But the fact that the full timers end up subsidizing the fixed costs for the part timers, I think, is what this is trying to solve and suggesting,
But
proposing.
that statement's only true if it is true that all full-time residents, kind of linearly use more electricity than non-full timers, right? I don't know that statement is actually, I genuinely saying, I don't know if that statement is actually true.
Let's look at it.
Exactly, and I'm fine with that. But
That's actually the
Right,
scope of this
right.
thing is that I said clearly in the beginning, let's look at it. That's basically
Right.
what I'm asking.
I guess we're going back to like the original part of this, like the previous board went through this rate design and said, here are all these dollars. And I think there was a, cost equivalency that I think was probably an inaccurate assumption to make in some ways, because so much of the fixed costs were embedded in the variable rate before. So making same cost makes the people who used more electricity, I'm not gonna say full time, just people who use more electricity were before paying for more fixed costs than non, because it was linearly with kilowatt hours. It was 70 cents a kilowatt hour, and almost all the fixed costs were embedded in that. And so trying to switch to a new rate that was cost the same wasn't probably the right approach. However, you have to decide how to allocate those fixed costs somewhere, right? And you all decided that it should be proportionate to kilowatt hour usage. And one of the things that I remember hearing in one of the board meetings was just divide by N. Like it's just whatever number and divide by N. So Vail is going to pay the same amount as someone who uses 1 kilowatt hour. But that was not what everyone decided. So what I'm hearing though, because a minimum charge is like, again, it's one mechanism. the problem that I hear you trying to solve, like one mechanism would be the base rate is just the fixed cost divided by N meters. Vail and everyone else would pay the exact amount. Right now, it's scaled by EDU. And so I'm just saying, I don't want to vote on, we should do a minimum charge. I would say, like, if that's what you're trying to say, that we are not allocating that fixed charge correctly, then I would want to think about that. What do we need? What is the problem? How far different would this be, maybe? And what are solutions that we could do? Because, like, you know, John was alluding to, there are inclining block rates. We could do a two-part fixed rate. We could do 50% of it is fixed per meter and 50% of it's scaled by EDU. We could do infinite number of things, but I want to make sure we're talking about the problem that we have to solve and have the data and numbers around to solve it first, instead of coming up with a mechanism to solve it. That would be my thought.
Go ahead, Howie.
I just have a quick question. Can you name a single electric utility in the United States that doesn't have demand charges?
For residential,
For commercial.
One, okay.
KMPUD.
Okay, can you name a second one?
For residential,
No, commercial.
for commercial or residential?
Commercial.
For commercial,
Do you know of a single one?
not many. I can't think of
Not
any.
many?
Not, probably not.
any?
Yeah.
None. There are none.
Absolutely.
I can tell you, I looked at all the rates for all of the Vail resorts, and every single one of them has a demand charge for commercial. So Vail Resorts is paying a demand charge everywhere in the United States except here.
Well, I personally believe that the most urgent area to be looked at is wastewater rate, including the bigger loan that we had anticipated. When we did the rate study, we were at 4 million, now we're at 7. So I think this needs to be looked at definitively.
I mean, it seems like I don't know. Yeah, I mean, these are fixed costs that we have to allocate somehow. And at least for electric, it was used by usage. I don't think it was also a percentage, because I think the percentages of what's trying to go into the fixed rates different for different utilities, right? Like some of the rates are designed differently on how much fixed cost goes into the variable versus the base fees as well. So, I mean, is this something that we would do outside of like a rate study though? Or is this as a part of the rate studies that we would do something that we would visit? I'm too new to know how you all have done this in the past, but is that typical to do that?
So let me offer a couple of observations. So first of all, a rate study, we follow by law a 218 process. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. And so doing one out of cycle is a large expense. And every time we do one, it's just a lot of work. So I don't think this board would want to do one out of cycle. The next, if we look at the next one coming up, it is water and wastewater. And if we were going to start that tomorrow, which I'm not proposing, we'd need to be able to tell the consultant some guidance on this is what we want you to look at. So I think if we want to look at this, it's appropriate, independent of what's going on, to say, how would we want to do this? And I think the problem we run across, if we say that we'd like to have all of the fixed costs covered independent of your usage, which I think is the way you're describing this, how do you decide if it was all residences, you might just divide it by them, but we have commercial. And so dividing the base rate by commercial differently, figuring out what percentage of the base rate would be commercial versus residential is an unknown. How to think about that.
Currently, we use EDU to actually compensate between commercial and residential.
Right. So you could say that all the EDUs that are currently residential, take that number, and then that's the percentage of the base. There are plenty of part-time residences who pay more of the fixed cost than their fair share. Okay, this isn't.
How come?
How come?
For electricity, if you have 60 bucks, no consumption, you are not paying your fixed cost.
But if you look at the data, but ignoring there are 60 customers that have small usage and are paying the minimum. The rest of them all pay more because their EDU is much higher. My neighbor pays $600 a month in fixed costs for electricity. I think that covers the fixed costs.
Since people are not paying, I mean, let's pick a number. I don't know the exact number, but actually what I'm asking at the minimum is for each department is let's look at what our fixed costs are. And I think we need to include maintenance of the infrastructure into that cost. And let's look at that and compare what it is versus the base fee that everyone is paying. And
Okay, but
it's a simple exercise.
yeah, everyone pays a different base fee because based on the EDU.
Except not really, because the EDU is, if everything would be at one EDU, it is a lesser problem. I
Well,
agree.
it is
But
for
now,
water.
arbitrarily, we decided to go down to 0.5 EDU because it was minimizing change. And that's exactly what we don't want to do. If you minimize change, that means you're keeping the bias that we had before.
The thing I'm trying to explain is for water, everything's one EDU.
Yes.
For electricity, everything is proportional to your prior usage. So there are plenty of customers that are not full-time residents whose EDU is well above 1. There are some that are below 1, that are at 0.5. So you'd find a mixture of things. Yes, Howard?
Why does your neighbor pay $600 a month?
Because they historically use more.
Right, and why? What do they have? That was using so much?
You'd have to ask them. I don't.
I mean, because, people can have an electrically heated hot tub.
Well, it doesn't matter. Electricity is a service we offer. We're not passing judgment on what they do with it. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of houses in here whose EDU is well above 1,
But
and they're paying their full fair share of the base rate.
I agree.
Yeah.
Actually, if people have an EDU greater than 1, I think it's a lesser problem. I don't disagree with that. But actually, with the structure that we've done for electrical rate, we basically kept the bias against full-time residents.
Okay.
Because if more people pay base fees, then the usage rate can go down.
Yeah, okay. So if we take that and say that an EDU of 1 was more likely to be fair, you could then say, let's look at the number of customers who are less than 1, whose usage is below a certain amount, and add in something and see if that's a material dollar amount.
For people, yes.
Yeah,
Sure it
okay.
is. Yeah.
So there are things you could look at. We're just trying to get a sense of what's the dollar amount.
The problem with your approach is you are basically.
No, I don't have any approach. I'm trying to translate what you're saying
this
into something that
approach,
would be a next step.
It's trying to go in nitty detail of use cases. And I think that, okay, these people, why are they consuming less? Let's get out of that. Let's look for each department. What are the fixed costs? And again, include maintenance of the infrastructure into that.
Bertrand, I just have to interrupt because you keep saying maintenance is not included in the fixed cost.
Is it?
Yeah.
All the labor, all the materials, all the equipment is all included in all the rate studies for all departments.
Okay, let me ask you another question. I remember precisely you saying that our infrastructure is aging and we are not really ready for that.
It is aging. That is correct. That's why we have a capital improvement plan. That's why we're doing the master
So
planning.
you are comfortable that our current budgets is sufficient to address the aging of our infrastructure?
I cannot answer that until the master plans are done.
Well, the other thing with the maintenance is, redistributing the cost isn't going to create more revenue to do more maintenance. So they're kind of two different issues, right? Like if you shift costs from what you're saying, which is part-time to full-time, it's not going to generate more revenue. If you want to have more money to do more maintenance, you need to generate more revenue, right?
That's not what we are trying to do here. What we are trying to do is making sure that every homeowner that turn the light and use the toilet and has these year-round facilities is paying its fair share of the fixed cost, because the fixed cost, even if there is no usage, we need to pay for them.
But I wasn't commenting on that. That's another subject. What came up a number of times is that it was kind of implying that this change would allow us to have more resources to do maintenance and improvements, and that's different than what you just responded to.
So, Rashawn, is the problem, so going, because electric, I feel like we talked about a bunch, is your concern that that people can have less than one EDU? Or is the fact that they can scale based off of usage, or both?
The concern is that people, specifically for electricity with less than one EDU, are not paying the fair share, because it costs more than $60 a month per homeowner to cover the 60 million debt that we had.
Okay.
It's more complex than that, but
Sure.
I'm just rounding up numbers here.
Sure.
But the fact is, look at wastewater. But anyway, this should be the bottom line, and our fiduciary duty to actually making sure that the fixed costs are paid equally by everybody benefiting from our services.
Right, and so
That's my statement.
and then you're to translate that into math and policy is anything less than one EDU is not paying that fair share. Is that right?
I don't even go there at that point. Let's do the
Okay.
first thing is, let's see what are the fixed costs, and we can effectively debate on how much of maintenance need to be added or not. That's something a financial committee should look at, in my opinion. But let's come up for each department. This is a fixed cost. And now we know how many customers we have, and indeed commercial are going to be, we have to use EDUs like we do for everything else. And if you want to compare to residential, and then let's see how that compares with our current base fee structure. That's what I'm asking. And I think it's, and then when we have that data, let's discuss again and see if we think people are paying their fair share or not, based on the number, not on a feeling or a sensation.
I have one other question for you. Do you add this, do you say, you measure this every month or just say on an annual basis? Is it okay to just say on an annual basis?
I'm
The-
thinking.
the total,
I understood your question. I was just thinking
Oh,
at
okay,
the
I'm sorry.
impact. Yeah. No, I think we could do it yearly. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see a problem with yearly. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, Howard?
Bob and Fleur has her hand. up.
Okay,
She's had it
I'm
up for a
sorry.
while.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just have no way of seeing that. Yeah, on floor, go ahead and then we'll go to Howard.
I just wanted, I think, to say a couple things. I think one, that doing this kind of as a two-step process is first, like, let's look at what are the fixed costs and what the current fixed fees are that people are paying, and see how those line up. And then I think another way, just the thinking about this is, the HOAs, when you have a whole bunch of condos in a building, everybody is paying towards the heating and the common area lights and all of the infrastructure that they're all benefiting from, regardless of how many days a year they actually show up to use those services. But regardless, they're still paying their HOA fees to cover all of those services. And I think transferring that thought process more closely to look at how the utility is running and how those fixed fees are being covered makes sense in distributing those costs for everybody that is benefiting from having that infrastructure in place. But I think it's first, you kind of have to look at where we're at. And I don't know when the rate study for water and sewer is scheduled for in the scheme of things, but maybe we look at there first, since we did just redo the electrical rate, see what it looks like there. And then when we get to the electrical rate, we can have a better idea and try and implement a similar plan.
Okay, Howard?
Yeah, I just want to say that I want to thank the board for, and particularly you, Bob, for, the whole concept that we need to have bigger fixed monthly charges. Because now we have a 22 cents a kilowatt hour rate, and I see more people around charging their EVs, myself included. makes more sense to charge here than at a Tesla supercharger. Even though it takes 48 hours to refill my battery, who cares? I'm parked in front of my house. So I do thank you for that. So that was, the rates were a major improvement over the previous structure.
Consent Eric too.
And- I said previous.
No, just that, Bob, it's okay. But I do have a question there. Am I correct in saying that, is this the last year of the wastewater rate increases?
No, that was adopted in,
But we had 3 years of increases built in.
5 years or
it
something?
was 5, I believe. It was a 5-year.
Yeah, it was quite a number of years. I think this is the last.
So it was adopted, I believe, and you're taxing. 2020, so
Yeah,
we should start the rate study in 23-24.
but there's two questions. One is, it goes for 5 years, but I think there are rate increases built in for 3 years.
There's a CPI built in for all.
Right, but there was a specific rate increase for 3 years that was higher than the CPI.
Oh, there was a catch up. You're right.
Yeah,
That was for
yeah.
wastewater though, not water, but yes.
Yeah.
My memory
Wastewater.
is that was aimed at understanding fixed costs and how we would fund for them $4 or $5
Right.
million at 3.5%.
That's right.
Right, that included the
So
wastewater treatment
that
plant. You're
was
right.
trying to cover that capital improvement for that utility.
Right,
Correct.
that's right.
And the anticipated wastewater treatment
I
plant
remember
project.
Discussions pre-Eric about the discrepancy between the percentage of water and wastewater that costs actually go to, they're actually fixed or base rate,
Mhm.
which are fairly significant. at every time. Let's just say propane.
Right.
Electricity is somewhat resolved. I would just point out that Bob was the guy who wanted even more.
I asked for 100%. I ended up with 80.
And I listen to you guys. No, that's fine.
Well, actually,
Okay,
yeah,
I say, I don't want to.
Yeah.
it is still a significant improvement.
So-
In any case, I just want to say that in previous rate studies, this fixed variable or usage was taken into consideration.
right.
In all those rate studies, maintenance, depreciation, future capital costs were taken into consideration. But I remember with Michael Sharp, the first time we did it, with water and wastewater, there was a huge reluctance on the part of the board, to be included, to go up as much as Michael was saying we would have to go up to cover depreciation. So what we settled on at the time, this was before this last rate study, was let's just cover our non-depreciation costs. Because, people can only absorb so much, right? Increases at any one time.
Okay, good. Let me try to see if we can consolidate this. And so in the current base rates for water, they cover 50% of fixed costs. And that was, Eric, I'm going to ask you to clarify or correct me if I'm wrong, but the consultant recommended that, because we know our fixed costs, and they included potential increases in the future that were built in. And we put 50% of the fixed costs in the base and 50% went into usage. That's what I remember, but I don't trust my memory.
I do remember the consultant was very uncomfortable with assigning only one EDU per residential. He said that was borderline on the
Yeah.
legalities. I remember that. He did a full analysis of our capital and our O&M and assigned them, but I vaguely, I'd have to go back and look, because I think it might have ended up being 50-50, but
Yeah.
he went through, if you remember, there was that table.
Yeah.
And he went through like salaries and wages should all be, this is your, how
Right.
much of this is O&M, how much of this is, and he broke those like 80-20, and the end result might have been 50-50, but I do remember him going through section by section, and the rates, anyone can go back and look at the rate study. That information's there and how
Right.
he broke it up.
Okay,
So is it in the 2020 rate study?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Because I look at it, I didn't see that actually. I look further. In the one I was reading, I didn't see an option with 100% of the fixed cost in the base fee.
No, it
No.
ended up being 50%
Yeah.
in each. The intermediate steps were not published. I mean, in the electricity, we went through 5 intermediate steps and every single one of them had a hearing.
Intermediate
The
steps
rest,
were published in the run-up to the final adoption.
yeah,
Yes.
okay, but so anyway, right now, the best of my memory, 50% of our fixed costs are in the base rate for water and wastewater, and 80% of our fixed costs are in the base rate for electricity. I believe.
With the caveat of the 0.5 EDU, which.
Yes, but if you add up
You
the
add it
total
all up.
number, it's 80%
Yeah.
of the base. Okay. So if we wanted to know then how many customers, and if we just say that the percentage of EDUs between, for a starting point, between residential and commercial are just whatever they currently are. And we just want to know how many customers are paying less than that on an annual basis, just as a starting point, and how many paying more.
Okay. That'd be helpful.
That could be a starting
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So we're all on the same
Yeah,
page.
if you
I would
have-
recommend using the,
Can I add
yeah.
one more thing?
please.
So how many and what the average, the median, so we can actually see how much money is at stake.
Right, that's right. So part of it is to say, is there material difference and how far off are we? Just as a starting point, because if it ends up being not a big amount of money, I mean, whatever, and that,
I'm fine with this approach. I think we ought to look at it, and that's a fine way to do it.
okay.
And I'm thinking propane as well, and I'm thinking, and propane, we don't need a 218. So we could go
But
faster.
we don't need a 218, but we, as a board, we've historically always treated it. Electricity and propane as a
So
218.
when was the
It's just,
last propane study?
Before my time. So
Yeah.
it was
so-
quite a while ago, and also
So,
propane, the
it
fixed
looks like
costs are
we are
almost
due.
zero.
Yeah.
I mean, propane, the fixed costs are almost nothing. We're trying to just extend its life and retire it. So it's a pretty small thing. And our propane prices are cheaper than going to the store and buying your tank and bringing it in. As near as I can tell, they're very, very cost effective. And that wasn't true when Mountain Utilities used it as a profit center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So does that sound like a
so-
reasonable
so-
first step is
So
to
my
start?
concern for propane would be, I personally believe that this full meter retrofit and the curb stop retrofit, all these things is something that the district should have moved on and budgeted for it and charge for it. That would be less
Okay, that's
traumatic like of what we've done here. And actually, I kind of believe this is our responsibility to do it.
okay.
So Bob, you're saying that to do this as we come up on the subsequent rate studies to incorporate these questions for the rate consultant to consider.
Well, I'm suggesting that we could know where we currently stand just as a starting point. I don't know when we'd be able to get
First
that done, but as a first step, so we can figure out.
I don't know. Tell me what project you want me to set aside that. I am flat out of staff.
Yeah.
And we keep adding these things. So tell me what you don't want us to do. This should be done as part of a rate study by a professional consultant, not by staff, not by the board. This should be done by a professional consultant that knows the law and should be in consultation with district council. Because I heard a lot of things today that I already know are not kosher under Prop 26
We are
and
not
218.
yet there.
I'm sorry. Please, I've been really good about trying not to interrupt you. I would ask for the
appreciate
same
that. Thank
courtesy.
you.
So I think this is a good idea, but it should go with each subsequent rate study, these questions for the rate consultant to consider as part of that, not as its own standalone project, because it will come up again in every subsequent rate study with the same questions or with new ideas, or no, I didn't mean that, I meant that. No, I didn't mean that, I meant that. We've gone through this multiple times. I see the pattern. And so I strongly recommend if the board's going to adopt this, that either they hire a rate consultant now to consider this in the whole legality or get district council to do it or do it as part of the rate studies in each year that they're scheduled.
Yeah, I think I agree with all or most of that. I don't see the finance committee taking on responsibility of doing a mini rate study without looking at one factor and not all the factors required to do a new rate study. So I think I don't think it's a proper assignment to a finance committee to go do a rate study. I think we can gather up input and we can give that to a consultant, and we do have rate studies periodically that are going to kick off that can take this into consideration. And I think there's probably some merit here.
So I find it interesting because this fairness question is coming back on a regular basis, and people, wow, what's fairness? And we don't even want to look at what the status, which is not a rate study. It's just looking at what are fees costs per department and what are the base fee and how they correlate. And actually what you propose, Bob, is good. So we have a sense of the magnitude of the issue. If it's going to be for cents, just forget it. But it's a simple thing to do. So we have a sense of how fair these things are. And I, for one, I think it's part of my fiduciary duty to make sure that the PUD rate are fair. And it's a little work to do. I'd be happy to do it if I had access to the whatever. But we are not at the stage that we are going yet for a rate study. And so just look, it's an assessment of the situation, what it is, and then we can discuss, okay, we'll do that at the next scheduled base rate. Let's not take note. We had this new mean of keeping ideas that we want to achieve that Bob and you put together. So we keep ideas that we want to proceed, but at the minimum, we need to look at it. And so we have a sense of that issue of fairness.
And just to take it one step further, if we found that there's some arbitrary fairness that we think we've crossed,
yeah,
is the idea that we would take action on it immediately out of cycle, or would it still be, oh boy, this is because I guess going back to like when to do it, if we weren't going to take action on it. I have no
preconceived idea. I'd like to see where we are before we make any treatment. If we are totally off base, I'd like to speed up things. Yeah. If it's something that's reasonable and will be tackled in time, and certainly I'd like this concept to be put in further in the future in new rate studies. I'm not asking the district to do rate studies. I mean, the staff, I'm not asking financial committee to do a rate study either. It's just assess that situation, knowing if we agree that fixed costs should be borne by everybody, not just not in the bigger proportion by the full-time resident.
Yeah. So,
and actually, the district itself is the sewage plant is a fairly big customer of the PUD on electricity, and this actually is a 365 year-round system. And while the resort is mostly consuming electricity 5 months a thing, I'd like to see how this correlates actually.
Yeah. So I guess, Bob, what I would say is I'd be comfortable doing this sooner than later, but to Eric's point, like not at the same capacity. We would push something else off, and it just has to be decided as to what gets pushed off if we were to do it now. I mean, I'm comfortable with having that conversation if we were to do that. But I think it's an important topic, but we can't just add it to the list. We have to, push something back so that staff would have time to work on this. I mean, I think that's the reality. So I don't know what to do with that, or, but I think the board would have to agree that that's the right move. And I know, John, it sounds like Maya has a different opinion. So we have to move forward in some way, I think, in that way.
Well, I think this is one definition of fairness and looks at one factor. And I'm not sure it really resolves an overarching answer if all our rates on all our utilities are fair or not. I think this is kind of simplistic. I think we all take fiduciary responsibilities seriously, Bertrand, so I'm not sure what that comment was about. But if you put this into the finance committee, I think most likely the recommendation is going to be to retain a consultant.
And an attorney.
Quick question for Eric. Are there other things that could be pushed aside, or is everything that's kind of stacked up now really kind of critical?
Everything's really good. And quite frankly,
Yeah.
John's absolutely right. It needs to go to a rate consultant. I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, we had an actual professional rate consultant who's done this for 30 years, do our water and wastewater. So I think the complaints I'm hearing are without merit. He knows what he's doing. He knows what's legal. So I'm going to set all those aside. We want to go back and look at, I don't even know what we're looking at. Are we answering the fairness question first? I'm completely at a loss of what I would tell a consultant I need to even look at. So yeah, we need to, if the board wants to pursue this, find 100 grand. We don't have any more money in the money tree. The property taxes is full, so not there. Find money to get a consultant in here to do this. If that's what the board wants to do.
Yes, Eric.
Just a suggestion. I mean, we've got one rate study that's 3 years old. One of the two largest costs. Study that's a year and a half old on electricity. The other big thing. You know what base rates, you know how much revenue is coming in, and base rates is right on your income statements.
Mhm.
So go to the rate study, say, well, here's the fixed costs according to those rate studies. Up it with some inflation factor or something at this point. Maybe because the capital cost was higher, but the interest rate was lower. I don't know what the difference is on that. You just compare it, and you get, at least you get an idea of two businesses. It answers partly your question, right? So that's just a comparison of information that already exists. That doesn't say anything about how the fixed rates, the base rates are distributed. That's a different question. But at least your first question is, are the base rates being covered? Are the base rates covering the fixed costs? You know it's not 100%. The question is look at it and sort of say, oh, here it is. Is this how big of a problem is this? And is this a problem that wants to be tackled during your budget cycle, during your rate studies?
Good point.
Those are the two big ones. Totally wouldn't matter that much. Water matters.
I don't,
I mean, I think that, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm putting words in Bertrand's mouth, but I feel like the bigger issue was the distribution of this, right? I mean, that's what that seemed like the genesis of this. And I don't think, I did not disagree with what Eric said, but I think the distribution question is the concerning part, or the part of question in question. Is that a fair summary? So, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we either do it now or we do it later. And we can have some ballparks on just coverage of costs. If we could, that should be pretty straightforward. But we either include this, as Eric said, we make room for this, or we have to include this as a part of the rate study. But I think it's a good question to answer, at least to know the distribution relative to, divide by N, relative to what people are paying and stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
the
but
electric is probably still in there.
Doug, you made a good point a few minutes ago, though, which is whatever the answer is, how could you act on it? And the way to
Exactly.
is to do a rate study.
Yeah, I mean, that's my concern, is that if we find out, if we do it today, it's going to be, okay, we're going to put it off 3 years because we're going to do part of a rate study. That's my only concern. But if there's a mechanism for, I mean, this is where me being a little bit newer is like, I don't know, would there be a mechanism to do something out of loop if there was a big concern, using air quotes for big there, because that's not a very objective number. And if the answer is that we're not going to do anything with this information other than ponder it, then I think we would have to wait to have it part of the rate study, because we're not going to action it. There's no reason to do something different today. That's I think the harsh reality of it. I don't know that I love that, but I mean, I think that that's the reality of it, then that's the reality of it.
Okay, Eric?
So I'm trying to take notes, and that was the first coherent thing that I think I really can wrap my hand around. If I was to hire a consultant, what am I trying to ask them to solve? So if I was to hire a consultant, the question is the distribution of fixed charges in our base rates appropriate, correct?
Unfair. You know, in some.
Is it
this all subjective.
allocated appropriately? Because
Is it-
fair
yeah.
is subjective. I don't want to deal in emotional words. I want to deal in factual. So
100%.
is it proportionally correct? So I could write an RFP. Well, basically, if the board wants to go and spend money, don't have, we could hire a third party to come and review the last two rate studies. Is if I were to distill it down to its basest component of what we're asking this rate consultant to do, because they're going to come in and they're going to be completely baffled by this, because this isn't how any utility works. But if I ask them, we want a third party review of the last two rate studies, particularly with regards to the distribution of fixed costs relative to base charges and the proportionality, that's what I would ask them. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Is that general consensus of what this whole distills down to in the basest component?
I think so. I mean, Bertrand, you brought this, so I'm not going to answer for you. But
I still think what Bob was proposing was very simple and would give us an idea.
But I think that what Bob proposed is what.
And I'm
What is
going
what
to
you
do
said.
exactly what you suggest, actually, Eric. So that I'll take care of that.
Okay, is there any action we're voting on now, or have we had our first discussion?
Well, why don't I do what Eric suggests, and why don't you look at just what you did suggest, and we come back on that topic another meeting? No staff involved, no staff time.
Well, I'm under orders to only do research that's directed by staff. That happened last year, and I'm not going to violate that. So I think we should stop at this point and move on. Let's think about how because there's the question of what are we, if we're not going to action on it for a year and a half, what's the point? You know, we should slot it into when it's a convenient time to understand a little the analysis. So I'm happy to do
At
it.
least my 2 cents with regards to water and wastewater is hiring a third party to come in and review it. They're going to say, yes, this was done exactly the way it's done everywhere else in California, from soup to nuts.
Well, we are not typical.
They're going to say their study is done correctly per the law from soup to nuts, whether we're atypical or typical, there's the bounds of the law.
I'm not criticizing the red study. Actually,
But you
there was
are.
decisions that were made based on input of the board and you, I guess, or the guy before. And that's a different story. I don't think we need to double check the past red study.
So then the past rate study is fair. If we don't need to check it, it's fair.
I'll rephrase what I said several times. Here in Kirkwood, we are not a typical utilities. We have a very high rate of fixed cost, I should say, not high rate. We have a high fixed cost to share with a small population and customer base. So the question I was asking today the board is it fair that not 100% of the fixed cost shared by all the customer regardless of usage?
This is getting to be pretty redundant at this point. I think we understand what was written as part of the board package. Bob, you want to make a call on what you want to do here? I don't see kind of an amateur rate study being done as a worthwhile endeavor. I do think this might have merit, and we should definitely support this as being one of the inputs into a rate study in the future. That's my position. If you want to say in the finance committee, we're supposed to do kind of a back of the envelope on this, I guess we could talk about that.
Howard has
Okay,
another comment.
Eric, I do have some questions about the last wastewater rate study. I think there was like a 55% strength factor added for commercial. Is that correct?
I don't remember what the strength factor was. It
Whatever it was that based on sampling? Or is that just based on history?
was based on type of business and the historical usage.
It wasn't based on sampling. So the ski area has put in no flow urinal as an example, further concentrating their waste. The wastewater treatment plant does not treat.
I'm just going to say that in the interest of time, this has nothing to do with this question that we're currently discussing.
Eric is saying that the wastewater rate study was done properly.
We're only discussing at this,
Not.
I'm sorry, we're only discussing at this point what's in your original proposal. I don't want this meeting to go on to other topics. That's inappropriate.
Yeah, but Eric is saying the wastewater study was done properly. And being an expert on that subject, I assert it was not done properly.
All right,
Okay.
that's a different topic. We're not going to spend time on that now. John, my feeling is I just don't see how to move forward in terms of a direction to staff from this conversation. I think we've reached a realization that this is something we'd really like to understand better, but I don't see how to reconcile that with currently available staff time and the fact that we would start a rate study in 18 months. So I would suggest at this point, I don't know what to do except table it.
Could it be moved up at all?
No.
6 months?
No, I mean, we designed these so they work for us in terms of our annual, the new rates start at the new fiscal year. It just changing all this around after 3 years of COVID and everything else that's been done and all the new staff that's coming in. I don't want to suggest that the staff be under that sort of stress for this. And I certainly don't want to propose that's what happens.
Yeah, and I'd also like to see it done properly with the right expertise applied. And that generally means it's going to take a little bit longer.
So I'd suggest unless someone wants to put a resolution up for a vote, I'd suggest that we move on. I think it was a good discussion. I see the merits of what's going on, making it fit in the proper time frame with the resources, I think is the open question.
I guess the only thing I would add, I concur with that, is that are the owners of undeveloped property paying their fair share? And my subjective opinion is no. And that's how we financed East Meadows. Right, and did the membranes, came up with a membrane solution on making an agreement with people who owned undeveloped property. Belarus district.
Mhm.
So that's another factor. I think,
Yeah,
that should
okay.
be factored in. I don't want to,
Okay,
I'm not prepared to make any recommendations today. I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
Fine with not burdening the staff. What I'm proposing is actually board members get involved. I mean, Doug could look at this thing. I'm going to do what Eric has suggested. And if you could look at this simple orthogonal verification that, so we have a sense of how much of an issue it is. That's what I'm recommending.
okay, so I'm ready to close this
Are you
item.
okay with that, Doug?
I mean, I can't do anything without, this is what Bob said, is like, I'm not gonna do anything without the board recommending or the staff
No.
recommending, so I can't do anything, but I'm just saying that like,
That's what I'm asking. The board is you as well. Are you volunteering to do this kind of search? Bob did volunteer something, I'm volunteering something, that's enough, that's all we need, yeah. And that give us, you can come back later, give us 3 months if you want. Anyway, whatever we find is most likely we'll have to wait the new rate study cycles, but at least we have a sense where we stand.
Well, Doug, are you taking this on as an individual contributor, or is this a finance committee issue?
I think what Bertrand is proposing, as I would take this on as an individual effort in my interest of doing it. Yeah, I mean, assuming that it's, Bob, I guess I could work with you on whatever it would be, and Eric on getting data if we wanted to. I could.
No,
but
I'm under orders. I don't do
So-
anything.
And quite frankly, as a reminder, the board's role is to set goals and policies, not, I
To
mean,
do work, yeah.
you want to terminate me, which I know at least one of you does. Go ahead. You guys can become the new general manager at,
No, that's not good.
but that's what we're, no board operates this way in a utility
Yeah.
sphere. None.
Yeah.
It's just,
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next item. The state legislature lobbyist. So I generally don't know what to do with this, but I wanted to bring it up for a board discussion. So this last cycle, we put in a request for $1 million for a new fire truck into the state budget. It was in the budget for a long time and then disappeared in the last week or two. The effort was done primarily by Johan Cleese as a volunteer, community volunteer, and myself, but we didn't do it as we did it as an occasional effort. We didn't do it as a major time thing. And the end result is at the very end of the cycle, it disappeared from the budget. So one proposal, so there's 3 things we could do. One is we could forget the budget and just raise our money ourselves. The second thing we could do is try it again like we did this last year, which is a little bit of effort on Johan and my part and see if it gets done. We do have a new state senator this year, and that will help in terms of the politics.
You do?
Yeah,
Who?
Marie,
Who? Oh, okay. The Republican that became a Democrat?
no.
Carlo.
Yeah, I'd have to look up her name.
So
Marie,
For what district?
for our district,
Which district? You have 2 districts.
District 3.
Okay,
This
yes,
is the state senate.
Because Amador is a part, Kirkwood Amador is part of a different district.
Yeah, see, there are 2 districts now.
The
Alpine County
district,
was separated out.
the Alpine County
Okay,
That's
state
District
senate.
3, yes.
yeah, you're in a different district.
Oh, okay.
Just to make things more complicated.
All right, good. Okay, yeah, so anyway, we could try to do it kind of that way. And the other proposal is we could hire Rebecca in this proposal that's printed here, and then she would make it her priority to make sure that she tracks it every step of the way. So that's kind of the question for the board discussion, whether this would be 8 months at $4,000 a month, starting pretty close to immediately.
Definitely in
That costs
December.
a third of what we want to
Yeah.
achieve, right?
Well, no, we'd get $1 million at a cost of 32,000.
Well, an expected value probability of $1 million.
What's that?
Expected value of $1 million.
Yeah, yes. There's no guarantees
Yeah.
in this, in the budget,
And this will be in the special tax assessment too. The fire truck is in the 3 budget scenarios that
Right.
that we've given.
Yes,
And the
right.
contract can be expanded to 40K as well.
If the budget isn't resolved at the end of June, then it would go on for 2 more months. Let me say that almost always happens. So I think it's more accurate to say it's a 10-month contract, yeah.
So essentially, we'd be spending 34,000 to try to get $1 million with no guarantees.
Yes,
40,000.
I'm just,
$40,000 to have a line item in the budget.
do we have anything that we saved for this project at all, or is it we're starting from zero?
We can, no, the way I would propose funding this would be from the C3. I have valid, well, I asked her to verify that that's.
No, no, 501c3s lobby all the time. I just don't know that I'd want to answer the community. I'd have a hard time voting for that.
Yeah, I think we've got an alternate source for the funds through the special tax. So we also have changes in our representatives that minimally, I think we should shelve this for a while and see.
Okay, if you don't act early, you can forget about it being in the budget. So this is something that needs to happen.
Right, but
What was the feedback on why we were dropped from the budget this year?
although we had the support of the assemblyman and the senator, no one was bulldogging it or looking out for it at the end.
Right. That's basically correct.
So we think this lobbyist could get them to champion the line item?
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearly, there are no guarantees.
No.
The other option is we see who the new staffers are, because that's going to change as well. I mean, new assemblyman, there's new senator, new staffers, and I think it's all new assembly on a new senator.
Yeah, but the budget chairs are the same.
Right, but I mean, if we're going to approach them, we need to meet with their staffers. We don't know who their staffers are yet.
Yeah, they're just meeting this month.
Well, the economic prospect of the coming year are not bright, so I'm a bit like John, and maybe we should skip a year, actually. I'm not. It seems to be a far reach in the current economic juncture. Maybe a few years down the road, we could go revisit that issue, or maybe even next year.
I wasn't suggesting we skip it. I was suggesting we get the staff early involved and get buy-in from the center, so they are championing it. Championing. Wow, that's a word. Yeah, that's a word.
I was talking about John. I didn't say
sorry.
you said something.
But someone else.
Yeah.
So that would be the other option. There is still that option that we could still try a little more proactively.
Yeah.
They have limited pork that they can put on. So is it something that they're going to be that interested in? Are we that big of a voter base that the new senator is going to care about us more than she cares about Lake Almanor or Quincy or the big cities of her district? And that's the question. And we would know that answer, I guess, pretty early on.
That's really what I intended. What I said was not drop the attempt to try to get a line item budget, but defer paying a lobbyist.
Okay. I'm not hearing any appetite to budget this.
It's a little risky.
Okay, then I will get back to Rebecca and thank her for her proposal. Okay.
And then the question would be, before we move off topic, because we're still safely within it, do we want to form another ad hoc to do the lobbying again like we did last time?
I think the proposal has a very high probability of happening in its second try. But we did it top down last year, but we didn't do that much bottom up.
So get some staff meetings set up for all three. And early, like you said, probably end of December, January. I mean, they aren't going to be sworn in until January, but the staff is going to be filled by the end of this month.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Because we have three new. So talking to Bigelow or Dolly does nothing for us now.
Right.
Except for Megan Dolly, it does do something for us because she is one of the new.
Right. She's the continuity. Yeah.
So I'd be happy to, I'd be happy to, I think we could peel out time for that.
Okay,
That's normal.
we'll keep it that way.
So we're in 3 counties and 2 districts, just to make things more complicated now.
3
Is that
districts.
correct?
We're at 2 assembly districts, 1 Senate district, right? I think.
I'd be happy
So
to
look at the map and let's move on.
look at the map.
Seemed
Sorry,
pretty
but we're
different
running-
with the
yeah.
ballot this year.
Yeah,
It seemed like that's.
okay, good. Then we'll move on to duties of board members. So the Personnel Committee, we hadn't looked at this for quite a while. Actually, I can't remember the last time. So we looked at the section which you all got, which is the duties and responsibilities of board members. And we just wanted to know whether the board liked the language the way it currently is, whether they wanted to consider any changes to it. And so in looking at this, we discussed a couple of items, section 1.4 on personal conduct, whether it's fine the way it's written. We also looked at potentially clarifying how board members are to collectively support our actions in public and how to bring policy changes back to the board for discussions. And then section 1.5, possibly adding things about reinforcing staying on the topic and how to suggest additional changes. And then the possible creation of a section 1.9, which is consequences for violation. We're not saying that anything needs to be done, but we wanted to bring it for discussion to see whether people are happy with it. As Doug asked me in the very first board meeting, what's my goal? My goal is to figure out how we can have different views, different opinions, but work as one team. So that's why I'm bringing it, just to see what people think.
Yeah, let me bring just one precision, because I remember vividly the things that we actually took that topic just after I was first on the board. So I'm on my 3rd year, so I would say we took that 3 years ago. So just
Okay.
to give you back.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
It's not forever, yeah,
It's
okay.
just, so it was looked at. So I don't know now, I can make a few comments.
Mhm.
Personally, I mean, I don't think, I understand your view of one team, diverse view. And I mean, the goal of having a board actually is to have different views.
Mhm.
That's why we have 5 people, hopefully representing different part of the community, which I think for the first time, thanks to Doug, it's happening. We have someone from the center of the Valley and the condominium association. And actually, I'm not aware of us having a problem. First, I trust that the president is responsible of maintaining the order. And I think you did it today when we start moving out of topics. And to me, I'm not seeing a problem. I think it's important that we discuss,
Mhm.
Especially the way we structure things, with pushing a lot of things to committee, and we don't have as much substantial discussion now in the board. Actually, our board meetings are much shorter than they are there and they're Eric, which is not a bad thing, but
Mhm.
I just don't see a problem. So I think there are more pressing issues that we should look at, and then now I'm ready to go off topic if you want.
No.
So that's my point here. Is
Okay.
I think I don't see a need for changes. That's my position.
Okay, Peter?
I'm okay with it. The only thing I might want to add is that the reason the Personnel Committee was established was to offer the staff a chance to appeal anything, problems that they have if they feel like they're not being treated fairly or not. And in lieu of having an employee union, the object of the Personnel Committee was they could go in and talk to the Personnel Committee. And I kind of feel that has been kind of lost the last few years. So I don't know. There's nothing that mentions that in here, but I just wanted to relay that was our original concept when we started the district, was to offer the staff as a place to come in and unload, not on an everyday basis, but if they felt that there was something.
Okay,
chaotic.
well, let me make it really clear. That's not what the Personnel Committee charter does or is currently.
I
And
know,
what,
I know, it's
and
just
we,
changed.
one of the things we did is we created this person available through our HR firm that is available for employees to contact, because that was missing. And so that we put that in place because the Personnel Committee does not serve that purpose.
Anymore.
Right.
It's like an ombudsman type of situation,
So
like just a general
is
third
that-
party outsourced.
Is that being utilized by them?
Just now.
It started in September. It's available. She did an orientation and I hope employees will take it. It's there for employees to be able to utilize. Yeah. Doug, do you have any comments on that?
I think just generally speaking, I appreciate you bringing this up and it's good for us to revisit. I mean, my only thought is just that it's implied, but just in terms of like conduct in board meetings, but also committee meetings, interactions with staff, I think it's implied just because it's board members shall, but I mean, I think enunciating that, it's like in our community, you're a representative in front of our community members as well. So I think it's implied in a lot of these. So I don't know if it wants to be enunciated in more detail, but as stated, I think it's implied. But those are the types of things I think of is, when we're out there and talking to the community members about board decisions or whatever, it's like you're representing all of us. Each individual person is representing all of us. And so we have to not say we don't agree with everything, but also just making sure that we're representing things well, but also in committee meetings, not just these board members as well. And that's my only real thought at this point. But
Yeah, and that's kind of what yeah. Okay, John?
It seems like there are decent guidelines. I think on the Personnel Committee being kind of a place for staff to go to. I think there's other places in the duties of the board members that preclude that. So that was my understanding, at least when I joined the board and got put on Personnel Committee last year, was that we're really not there to be an escalation point or something like that. That, the general manager is really
Yeah, and it's explicit in 2.2.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the general manager's responsibility, and and that's, you can't be a general manager if you have a.
Actually, I believe it said that if an employee approached us, we need to send them to the manager.
Right.
Yeah.
Or let them know there's this available resource.
Yeah, it's kind of the only way I think Eric could do his job, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
So that was my understanding coming in. I'm good with it. The consequences would be, I think, kind of difficult to add because you'd have to come up with some process for when you make a judgment that consequences needed to be applied. So I think that's kind of difficult. On the other hand, with these types of guidelines with no consequences, there's no teeth in our ability to do any sort of enforcement, right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, we don't have really a problem. I mean, it's not like we are an unruly board. I don't see that. Maybe people have a different opinion on that. That's what I want to say. I mean, the danger is, it's a bit like Measure D at Alpine. Did it pass or not?
No, it did pass.
It did pass.
It passed by a large margin, yeah.
Wow, I can't believe it. We should not preclude discussions. We should, I mean, the vagueness, the broadness of this thing, that's what I would worry if we start, and then we need to delve in minute detail to make sure we are not becoming a bit like Putin, which prevent people to mention the word war in this country. So it's a difficult matter. I don't see the need for it. And so, as I said, there's many other things that we should focus on.
Yeah, I wanted to have the discussion to just make it clear that if we want to argue the merits of different things, this is the place. A public hearing is the perfect place to do it. Once a decision is made, it's all of our job to represent the board. And if, and so I think we all want to do that. And I just wanted to have an explicit discussion on the topic.
I mean, clearly, once a decision is moved and voted and adopted by the board, this is the policy. I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So it'll be my job to verify. If I think we're straying from this conduct, I will not hesitate to comment, even though I like to avoid conflict. It'll be my job to remind people. Okay, good. Then we'll leave it at that. And now we're ready for item. Where are we?
Very last
Employee
one.
handbook update. Okay,
This just came to light. Basically, the district has operated on this policy for a long time. It's just, it was not explicitly clear and there was some confusion. So talked with CPSHR, they came up with this language and what recommends its inclusion, just to be clear.
okay, and that's the comment in red there.
Yeah, it's the only changes.
Yeah, that's the only change. Okay, and this is the policy we've always done, but
Correct.
we discovered it wasn't even
It
in the
wasn't
handbook.
explicitly stated and
Yeah.
we've discovered some problems that we're gonna have to rectify.
Okay,
I support clarity, so yeah.
okay. So is there a motion to adopt this
I motion.
inclusion into the, okay? Doug moves, second.
Second,
Okay,
And that's
the first second of the day by John.
hard to do over Zoom.
It is. What's that?
You're talking about adopting everything that's in red,
Yes, adding what's in red into the employee handbook.
just for clarification.
That's correct. I'm glad you asked. Okay, roll call, please.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Randa,
Aye.
Perot,
I,
and Dover, Brian.
Okay, general manager's report.
In the interest of you sticking with your record of not running too far over, we have almost filled all our snow removal positions. We have advertised for the customer service position. We have Brandy signed up for the electrical executive course in Idaho that I attended.
Excellent.
So I'm very, I mean, I just had a question about transformer availability and I went to my group, so I know it's gonna be a huge resource for her. Very excited about that. And Brittany just went to the clerk of the board training this week. She just got back today. So she's now up to speed on the Brown Act and the California nuances, having been on a Nevada, with a Nevada utility before. So that was great. Other than that, I'm done. Rick beat that.
Rick, operations report.
Well, Eric stole all my thunder, so I have nothing to add unless there's any questions from the board.
There is a pulse there, okay.
You did beat it. You did beat me. Dang it.
Okay, standing committee reports, start with finance.
Yeah, we covered most of the finance items already as part of the agenda. Probably the one thing that wasn't in there is just an update on the special tax consultant. I think they received most of the information they needed from the counties. So there is some progress there. That's about it.
Okay, planning.
Planning did not meet and will meet next week.
Okay, good. Operations.
So we didn't meet,
Okay, communications.
we didn't meet either.
Okay, you've been busy, huh?
Yeah, well, we're
All right.
trying to give the staff a little.
I got it.
break.
Personnel met and we discussed the two items that were on the board agenda. And then just an update on LAFCO. I did confirm with Terry that the municipal services review will be agendized for the December meeting. And each organization will be asked to update their own section. And then Terry also identified that the county has some additional resources now to help get this done. Just to remind people, LAFCOs are required every 5 years to do a municipal service review to make sure that all of the territories are properly covered and have the resources. And the LAFCO that we're part of hadn't done one for a long time. So Eric and I took the most recent one that was never approved. We converted it to a machine readable format. And
Well, give yourself a little more credit. They wanted us to pay half of $40,000 and Bob asked me to find a consultant that could take the old one because it wasn't OCR recognizable and actually recreate it. And that was done for the grand total of $1,000. So
right. So we want to avoid that high expense. So the expectation is that the next LAFCO meeting, we'll have an assignment to update our own section. Each of the area will be, and then we'll consolidate it. And Terry told me there'll be some additional resources available. So that will follow. That was a request from the last board meeting, which is the advantage of minutes. I think that's it. And in terms of committees, is there any general discussion any board member wants to bring up before we adjourn?
I just had two quick questions. We
Yeah.
talked about the schedule and agenda topic thing.
Yeah.
Just when do we next hear about that?
I was hoping to have a graphical version of it done, but this
Oh, good.
just didn't happen.
That's all right. And
So
then,
I'm sure we can have it ready for next month.
that's fine. And then,
Otherwise, we didn't add any additional items to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
and I
Thanks.
think.
Thanks for asking. Thanks for
It'll be my thing until it's done, I guess.
identifying the failure.
That's
It won't
all right.
happen
We
again.
have talked about it at our weekly report server meeting, so it is tracking with
Thank
things
you.
we're going to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Eric, I think I can't remember, and I ask this a lot too, but the electric study of the system, whatever, where is that or what happened with that?
Brandy, I asked you to talk to Dave Riley. Did you get an update from him?
He was out of the office. He's back in the office now. I don't have an ETA on when we'll get the results other than they were finalizing them. So I expect to see them fairly soon.
If we hear anything, I'll send an email to the whole board letting them know if we get a definitive ETA.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I have a few questions myself.
Okay.
First, you mentioned several times the master plan. Do you remember what the timeline on that? When are we going to see something?
So we had the wastewater one drafted, but then it snowed.
Yeah.
Then we need field work. So that one's
Yeah.
now set aside. So now we are drafting the water master plan because we
Okay.
already have a water well. So that's the next one we're going to do.
So that was my first question. So second question is the engineering study for electrical being completed?
That's what Doug just asked and we just
Okay,
answered.
So I missed it because that's a mask, sorry.
The answer is I will email the board when we get an ETA on the final report.
And my third question is just a general discussion, which is, can we have a bike rack somewhere so we can attach our bike? Nowadays, people have e-bike, and there is no place to put the bike or latch it on something. Is that something that?
If you would like to
Greens-
donate it to the 501c3, we would put it up in the summer. We obviously won't put it up in the winter because of plowing.
Not now, but in the concept is to have a bike ride somewhere for the public to be able to encourage people to come by bike, e-bike and else. I think it'd be a good green gesture to do.
I can tell you, we have almost no customers that come here. So I don't know that a bike rack here would do much except for sit there, but if you'd like to donate one, we would happily put one in. They're not that expensive. You can.
No, listen, I see it as
They're a utility.
No. I see it as a statement that we do encourage people to be green.
You want to, and you need a bike rack for wide tires, right?
Something we can latch it to.
Yeah, because it's not a conventional bike
No,
rack.
yeah, indeed, yes.
Because
Actually,
those-
what I have is actually for
For
a
wide
big, so
tires.
I'm not necessarily just something that the people could latch their bike to.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
That's it. Okay, Johnny, anything?
No, nothing to add.
Okay, so
I
we
just
just,
have a question.
oh yeah, please.
It's my understanding that Gavin Newsom is going to make meetings, it's going to eliminate the requirement for having meetings remotely, right?
No,
No,
the emergency
No, take a look
declaration.
at the email I
ends-
sent you. It's all detailed in there.
But just quickly, at the end of February, the emergency will be retired. And at
Okay.
that point, the old rules go back into effect, which is we need a physical quorum present
Right.
in order to conduct a meeting. If you're in remote location, it needs to be available to the public with a few exceptions.
So are we going to, at that point in time, unlock the building to the public?
It's already unlocked, right?
No, just for board meetings.
Oh.
Just for board meetings.
Oh, I see.
I'm
Okay.
just curious, have we thought about that? If there's no more, if there's not a new disease in the next 3 months, are we gonna reopen we plan to reopen? the
You know,
building?
Amador Water is keeping, as permanently closed theirs. We haven't seen a lot of traffic. I don't see the need to open it, to be honest.
Okay, I'm just a
Yeah,
question.
no, and I'm answering, yeah.
Okay. Good. I just want to remind people the next board meeting will be December 9th and we'll have the employee gathering
Party right after.
afterwards. So we will endeavor to make sure this meeting has a,
Well, people need time. I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, what time did we tell them we were serving food?
6.
6, so cocktails at 5.
yeah,
So it gives people time to get home. We should be okay.
yeah.
I don't see a lot on our agenda in December.
Okay,
I
well,
think we have
we'll
one
adjust the
thing.
agenda and make sure that's no more than 2 hours.
So we're gonna have our first cocktail in 20 minutes? Or-
Yeah, that,
Yes.
that clock's, that's a small
Ready.
problem. Okay, thank you all for your time. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Everyone.